Okay, testing. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. Welcome everyone to this Interbasin Compact Committee, February 15th, 2023 meeting. Great to see the folks that are able to make it here in person, kind of braving the challenging roads. I felt like it's kind of worse, like right downtown Denver than it was for me up in Summit County. But great to see the folks that were able to make it here, and great to see folks virtually as well participating. So it's my understanding we do have a quorum. Is that right? So let's move to the agenda was sent out. Want to just make sure that everyone's okay with the agenda items that we have before us. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Dan, I do have one addition.
Okay, great.
We got a request to at least have a discussion around additional PEPO subcommittee membership. So wherever you'd like to add that in.
Okay, we will add a discussion on that if everyone approves that. So do we have a motion for the agenda as amended with the addition of PEPO discussion?
Stan, because you're so moved.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no or nay. No. We have approved. Also, the minutes from the previous agenda and from our previous meeting in, I believe that was October, was sent out as well. Does everyone have a chance to look at that? And if so, do we have a motion to approve those minutes from the last meeting?
Move to approve.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, a second. Any discussion? Yep, we got a second. All those in favor say aye to approve these agenda for the previous meeting notes. Aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Okay, great. So we took care of that part, so that's great. So I just want to welcome you all here for this IBCC meeting, as well as folks that are online today. A big thank you to the CSU Spur for the use of this really cool hydro building. I wasn't able to attend the grand opening, but it was about a month and a half ago where they formally opened this up. It was the same day that they had the Boots and Business luncheon for anyone that's attended that before. I've seen photos. They had a lot of people out in front, and really cool building to say the least. I believe at lunchtime that the staff here will take us out on a tour if you want to kind of see some of the building and what they do here. So we should try to take advantage of that if possible. This area, as I think you all know, has some pretty amazing history. This was all the historic original stockyards established back in 1881 as the Denver Union Stockyard Company, actually. And the stock show, which is, right down the street here, celebrate 115 years. And they annually bring in about 700,000 people, believe it or not, which is just absolutely amazing, really important for our state's economy. And then this community really focused on helping to bring the public to see science in action, including this facility here where it's my understanding Denver Water now kind of runs a portion of their lab work here. But if you're interested in, getting a little tour, they have displays of kind of creative reuse systems and energy capture from wastewater and so forth. So it's pretty cool that we're having this meeting here today with this building that's really focused on water. Also, I really appreciate the challenge that that you kind of rose to the top in terms of me giving you a challenge to look at what projects you can get off in your basins to have success. It's been pretty amazing to kind of hear some of the stories, but this has really been, really unprecedented funding opportunity that we're having right now. And we'll hear from Nate later on in terms of what that looks like. But when folks say, what are we really working on? Like, this is very unique times, and I think we all need to work together to make sure that any federal dollar that's eligible to come to Colorado, comes to Colorado. Also, today's topic, we'll run through some pressing topics on Colorado water. We'll first have an update from Amy Ostick, and she'll give us updates on Colorado River issues. So thanks, Amy. And also Becky Mitchell is here as well. There's Becky. And we'll also hear from each IBCC member for a brief update on what they're doing to advance the basin project, and any other relevant basin updates that they have as well. And then also, as we talk about advancing funding opportunities, as I mentioned, we'll hear from Nate Pearson, but we'll also hear from Anna Moss. And then a little bit later, we'll have a legislative update from Kelly Romero-Heaney. And there's just so much going on at the Capitol too. The legislative session, goes from January through May. And, you blink and things are changing quickly. And then following lunch, Russ will give us an update on efforts to advance the turf bill program and the governor's urban landscape conservation task force. And that's pretty exciting developments with that. And then we'll also discuss IBCC planning and the PEPO subcommittee. So with that, without further ado, let me turn it over to Amy for a Colorado River update.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's great to be with you all here today. Thanks, Russ. So I'm just going to provide a few updates on Colorado River issues. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on. As you all know, there's a lot going on. It's great to have Becky here next to me, so if I miss anything, she can fill it in. Add color. So the first thing I wanted to provide some updates on is implementation of the Upper Basin States 5-point plan. As you all may recall, a while ago, the Bureau of Reclamation put out a call for additional conservation in the amount of 2 to 4 million acre feet in the Colorado River Basin. And the Upper Basin states recognized that while we did not cause the situation that we're currently in, we all know that, we still wanted to be part of the solution. So the 5-point plan was really meant to outline the actions that we were able to take in the Upper Basin. I don't need to go through all this, but a couple of the highlights that I wanted to go through: the System Conservation Pilot Program, which is a large-scale conservation program across the Upper Basin, temporary voluntary compensated reductions in consumptive use. I know that sounds very familiar to you all. So the application period for that is now open, and it has actually been extended thanks to really Becky making clear that we needed an extension. It's been extended through March 1st. So one thing I want to make clear is recognizing that project activity across the Upper Basin could start at varying points. We're taking applications kind of on a rolling basis. So if we get some and project activity would be starting earlier, we're willing to consider that and get people under contract when they need to be under contract. So there's more information about the application, the request for proposals and everything at the UCRC's website, which is listed there. But we encourage you all to take a look at it. Consider submitting an application if you feel so inclined. A couple other updates: the demand management feasibility investigation. You all may have heard that at CRUA, the UCRC released a couple of reports on the interstate investigation. And we want to be very clear that that doesn't mean that it's over. That simply lays out the next steps for each state to consider. We recognize that there are still open questions that each individual state needs to look at. So that's really what our board is going to be focused on for the next foreseeable future, I will say. So there are a number of, if you recall, items or agreements that would need to be reached in the storage agreement if we're going to set up a program. just as part of a feasibility finding. Things like monitoring and verification of the water, how it's stored, how it's released, things like that. So those are the types of discussions I imagine each state will be having within their own states and then amongst each other. A couple other things here just to mention that the drought response operations plan ongoing, and we are in ongoing discussions about accounting for that water, the analysis of effectiveness for having that water protect critical elevations at Lake Powell. We're also engaged in looking forward at what DROA means for 2023. Bipartisan infrastructure funds, we're still looking at how to put those to use to expand measurement, monitoring across the upper basin. And, you know, the last thing here is one that you're all familiar with and one that I just feel like I still need to say at every opportunity, which is that the most impactful thing that can be done is to live within the means of the river. We do that well in Colorado through strict administration, strict priority administration. The other upper basin states do that as well. And through that effort, you know, we've been regularly using much less than our compact apportionment. We used 3.5 million acre feet in 2021, down 1 million acre feet from 2020. I know you all have heard these numbers, but I think it's just important to remember again that if everyone across the basin had been doing that all this time, we wouldn't be where we are. And I think that really leads nicely, I would say, nice segue into what we've been working on more recently, which I'm sure you all have heard about a lot. Yeah, old news.
So 2 weeks ago.
So 2 weeks ago. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the 6-state letter that you all, I'm sure, have heard about by now. And what it's technically called is a 6-state consensus-based modeling approach, which is a lot of words. But what it really means is that the 6 states, which is all the states in the basin except for California, came together to provide a modeling framework that we believe reclamation could use to consider short-term actions to protect Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And this was provided specifically in response to the notice of intent to publish a supplemental EIS to the 07 guidelines, recognizing that the 07 guidelines are insufficient to protect the reservoirs where we currently are. So again, this is meant to be, the way that I've been referring to it is the sandbox in which we would encourage reclamation to play when they're considering options for protecting Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So it's not a 6-state agreement per se. We recognize we would need additional agreements to actually implement all of this, but it's meant to give them the tools that they might need, or the tools that they should consider in managing the reservoirs in the short term. And the reason I thought this was a good segue is because the big news here, I think, is the lower basin parts of this. So as I said, we continue to believe that the most impactful thing that can be done is to live within the means of the river. I'll say it again. And the very first thing listed here for the lower basin is a recognition of evaporation and transit losses of 1.54 million acre feet. So we got 2 lower basin states to agree that that should be a part of the solution, that it needs to be part of the solution. And again, a lot of that goes back to Becky being a broken record at every single basin states meeting and pushing really, 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 really hard for this. So we feel like this is a really big win, and we're really proud of that. It also calls for additional lower basin reductions when Mead hits certain elevations, 1050 and 1030. And finally, kind of a hard protection level at 1000 elevation. Meaning if Lake Mead is in danger, or if it hits elevation 1000, they would be taking additional cuts as needed to protect that. And so we think that this provides, it's a good start. It provides mechanisms to protect Lake Mead in the short term. So those are some of the lower basin components. The upper basin, again, because Becky just, I think, hounded this point repeatedly, that it was very, very important to the upper basin, we got recognition of hydrologic shortages, meaning anything that we do in the future has to take into account that we're already short. That 3.5 million acre feet that we used in 2021, that represents a lot of pain in the upper basin. That represents something that we are already doing and that we've been doing for decades, that has, allowed us to live within our means. And shows that we've done our part to protect the reservoirs. So the first component, again, is recognizing that, and in any modeling, recognizing that that is a key part. And it also defines and helps kind of make clear what else we can and cannot do. So we also committed to looking at additional voluntary conservation measures, or I should say we didn't commit to looking at them. It's part of the modeling-based consensus. But voluntary conservation measures like the System Conservation Pilot Program or any other program that might be stood up subject to agreement among the upper division states. But that explicitly has to recognize hydrologic shortages and recognize that in really dry years, our water users might not have that much to give to participate in SCPP. Just kind of the facts, the realities that we live within. And then the third component is, of course, considering additional drought response operations agreement releases. All of that is subject to the DROA. So it doesn't change any provisions of the DROA. We still have to go through the same process. Things like recovery, effectiveness, all those things are still there. We're just committing to essentially go through the process that we've already agreed to do. Additionally, it calls for constrained release tiers. So, the way that the 07 guidelines operate, there are some situations in which you would see balancing releases. So depending on the elevations, PAL might be releasing a range depending on where mead is and where PAL is. So this would essentially set releases at certain levels that are lower than what they would otherwise be, as opposed to the kind of guessing at what hydrology will give us and what will happen at Lake Mead and having to kind of make a guess about what the release might be. And finally, this is kind of similar or the parallel to the absolute protection volume at Lake Mead. When Lake Powell is in danger of falling below 3,500, releases would be reduced. So, in both of these components, it provides kind of that absolute protection of hydropower production at both the reservoirs. So that was, there's a lot there. And I only have actually one more slide, so I'll be happy to take any and all questions you might have about that. But, the big question, of course, is, well, what comes next? That wasn't, in effect, a 6-state agreement. It was not something that Reclamation, signed on the dotted line for and said they're going to go implement. So now we're kind of in a wait and see mode. And I guess I should also address the elephant in the basin, which is California, which did not sign on to that letter. They provided their own approach, which called largely for voluntary conservation efforts, and encouraged Reclamation to take an approach based on priority, which of course would mean California wouldn't have to do a whole lot. So we don't think that at this time is appropriately really responsive to the need to conserve 2 to 4 million acre feet to protect the system. Nonetheless, what I want to kind of emphasize here is that the discussion has to continue. So again, Reclamation hasn't endorsed any of these approaches at this time. We think it's important that we encourage folks to keep coming to the table, California included. We would like to continue, trying to work this out. So we're going to be in ongoing discussions with the basin states, tribal nations, water users, stakeholders, people across the basin. But we feel pretty good about the proposal we put out, and we're really hoping that Reclamation will see that as a viable solution. They will be releasing a draft environmental impact statement, likely won't be until April at least or later. And at that point, we'll see where we are and go from there. So a lot still to be figured out and a lot of discussion still to be had. And in the meantime, we're going to continue implementing our 5-point plan. We're still, engaged in the demand management feasibility investigation. Expect a lot of discussion on that in the coming months. And of course, the System Conservation Pilot Program, which I already talked about. So that's really all I had, but I want to, Becky, if there's anything that you'd like to add, please do.
I guess I would ask first if there are any questions, but I want to highlight one thing before we go into that. I think Amy mentioned this, but I think we should even emphasize it more, is that the acknowledgement that the problem and solution rely heavily on California and Arizona and agreements in that realm is a huge movement. I think recognizing that there isn't much that we can do in the upper basin that will save the lower basin. Also, the acknowledgement that when we look at the draw of water that has already gotten to Lake Powell, that sustains the lower basin for 1 month. And that is taking us a significant amount of time to get to Lake Powell. And it's also had significant impact on our local communities and the environment and agriculture, our futures. And so I really feel like the biggest success that we've had in all of this is an acknowledgement that the upper basin cannot cut back enough to save the lower basin's continued uses the way they are occurring. That also being said, as you hear, I think in the next couple of months, there'll probably be continued pressure to do more. And as always, and you probably heard at Water Congress, I have always said, Colorado is leaders. We will continue to do what we can that's right for the entire basin. That we don't do that blindly, though. As we look at the water orders that are coming in for this coming year, they're very consistent with every previous year in the lower basin. And so I think as we decide what actions we take in the lower basin, we really want to see real change. I think it's important, an acknowledgement of what's happening in the system, what's happening in terms of water availability, and a real-time response to that is what I feel like we need to see. And it isn't a standing our ground, but it is like, how do we do this better in the future? How do we learn from the mistakes of the past? And that has been one of my primary motivations. You've probably heard a bit of conversation about the law of the river and the importance of that. I am a firm believer in the compact. I that needs to be heard. I do believe in the law of the river and the compact, but one of those guiding principles in that compact, and it's important that we don't forget that, and it's important that others don't forget it, is that there was an equity component and the ability to preserve our right to develop. And so when we talk about taking 50% of an allocation, the upper basin states can say that they are doing that. The upper basin states can say that they are looking at what's available in the river and responding accordingly, and responding in real time. And we do not have the reservoirs above us to kind of equalize those flows. So as we look towards the future, we have a choice here. And I'm not saying we as just the people in this room, but we as the people that are responsible for the Colorado River Basin have a choice. Do we rebuild these reservoirs and be able to use them when necessary? Or do we just look at the flow of the river? And because at some point, the entitlements that are spelled out in the compact mean nothing if it's not there. And I know I am speaking in an echo chamber because we're in Colorado, and we know, and so it's easy to say these strong words here, but I can assure you that we're saying those strong words everywhere that we go. And it's not always favored, it's not always easy, but living within the means and responding is the most responsible thing to do. So we're going to continue to pound that. It doesn't mean that we don't value winter kale for those that like kale. It doesn't mean that we don't value agriculture. We do, but we also feel like our agriculture is as important. We also feel like our cities and towns and our environment and our recreation are as important. Our economic productivity within the Colorado, the upper basin states are of equal value. And so as we reflect on the law of the river, one of the components of that was equity. And I think the best thing that we can do for the river is live within the means. So I will take any questions. if you have any questions on this, if you want to give comment or echo anything that we've said, that's also welcome.
I'm sure we have questions, and maybe I'll start out. And I see we have Melly and Aaron, and I'm sure other folks online as well. But just curious, Becky and Amy, when we had the consensus 6-state letter and California didn't sign on, and then California kind of came up with their own letter. What was the sentiment of other states? Were there like components of that California letter that you think really other states should really look at that could be wrapped into potentially a 7-state letter, or were they just so far off that that wasn't a possibility?
I think it's important that there are some conversations of what's happening behind the curtains, and there was real effort to really try to get to a 7-state consensus. You all know, I bragged to everyone I was going on vacation, and I was leaving at Saturday night at midnight. And I committed and said in front of all 7 basin states, I will stay here till 9 p.m. on Saturday night. I need an hour to pack. And I think I think we were closer than expected, but there were still some things that California just couldn't get behind. The evaporation and the attribution piece was really difficult. I consider evaporation kind of the baseline, and negotiations start at that point. That really accounting for what actually is there, what's actually happening, is incredibly important. Like delivering water based on water that's not really there is not just smart water practice. And so, but I think that was a hard one for them, and they see it probably eroding some of their legal perspectives. But again, I think there are legal components to this, but there's also reality components to what as we look towards the future. And I think, how do we weave that so you protect yourself, but also recognize what's available and what's not available? So I think we are closer than I expected, but we just didn't quite get there. The door is open. I think everybody was committed to continuing to work across 7 basin states. That being said, I think the real heavy conversations have to happen between California and Arizona.
Thanks. Aaron, and then Melly, and then others.
So thanks for the update. I have a easy process question, and then I don't think it's difficult, but just a general question that maybe others can help with as well. Because the 6-state, it's not an agreement, it's a modeling approach. Is there any reason, or do you expect that, the Bureau can model as many things as they want. So is there do you expect that they will model that approach and include it in the EIS as an alternative? Or do you think that is politically fraught and they will do their own thing? That's my first question. And I'll just voice the second one. The other one is that I keep seeing this message in the news on like Twitter from California saying, we're the only ones who are following the law. And, we did the QSA, so we have shown that we can cut back. And for people who aren't in the conversation, that sounds like it's a good message. And I've seen people, and I've started little Twitter debates saying, well, that's only part of the reality. Do you think that there's, from a political perspective, recognizing now that there's a caucus around this, et cetera, do you think that message is something that needs to be more publicly countered? Does it actually create risk, or do people that matter who read that know that there's a lot of nuance? And of course, they're posturing. So that's maybe a little more complicated questions. Maybe the first one's easier.
I think they're both difficult questions. I don't have any. I'm trying to thread the needle on this one in terms of will the Bureau model that or not? I don't know. I hope so. I think 6 basin states standing united, asking for something, at least make it one of the modeling scenarios, I think is incredibly important. I think I think it's a hard position for them to be in. I have to acknowledge that. It's a difficult place. And so I don't know what's going to happen. We tried to give as much cover as possible. And I think that's one of the roles of the states, is to say, we're going to support tough looks, regardless if it is hard on us. Like we're going to support that. And so, and I think you saw that specifically from Arizona and Nevada, like that's not all beneficial to them. You know, that consensus modeling approach, it's not all beneficial to us in the upper basin states. We're willing to say, let's look at some hard things, because hard things, there's no choice but hard things now. And every day that passes, the choices become harder and harder and harder. And so if you think this is a hard modeling look, try 2 years from now, when you're modeling empty reservoirs. That's a really hard modeling scenario. So I think that's the alternative. In terms of the messaging, I appreciate that question, because so much of this is a kind of played out in press and scenarios, and I think that's part of the reason the statement that I made about the value of the agriculture and environment and recreation in all states, not just one state or 2 states. There is value everywhere. And we have to, while there may not be the same economic driver, that doesn't mean we're less valuable. Money is not the only measure of importance. And I think that's also incredibly important. And so, yes, I think we have to start. I don't know if Twitter is the place for that to happen or not. I also, being in the role that I am in, that's probably not the forum I would choose. I'm going to choose. But I do think the messaging that we all in this room have a responsibility to carry is what water means to us. What water means to us in our states, what water means to us in our reservoirs, what water means to us in the entire upper basin, and how important it is to every single person. So I don't care what side of the divide you are on, the Colorado River touches you, and it is of state importance across the board. And so in terms of messaging, I think that's where we have responsibility, and that's where I think the IBCC CEC can play a role, is really focusing on how are we unified in this? What does this mean? How are we tied together, whether it's East Slope, West Slope, whether it's agriculture or environment? How do we do that well? Because we do. And we have programs within the CWCB and across all of DNR and other state agencies also that tie that importance across sectors. And that is where I think we can be helpful, that messaging can be helpful, and that it isn't just about the almighty dollar.
And can I just add one little bit? I actually think your second question was a lot easier than the first question on the legal authorities part. And I'm going to try to not pretend to still be a lawyer, but there actually is very clear legal authority in the lower basin as opposed to the upper basin. The Secretary of Interior is the water master in the lower basin and has very clear authority with respect to deliveries to lower basin water users to force them to take shortages when that is required. That is not the case in the upper basin. And so I think California's argument there that they are the only ones sticking with the law is incorrect. And so I think that's actually a very easy, point to make.
And again, speaking in the echo chamber, we did a really good job of talking about how we share overages. The lower basin shares overages, but we didn't do a really efficient, good job on shortages. And remember, when 6.3 is going into Powell and 7 million is going out, or some number larger than what's going in is going out, the reservoir is going to continue to drop. It is a pretty easy math problem that I see. And I do think we have to make a determination that we're not going to allow that. And the we is the federal government in this realm, but that we can't allow more to go out than is coming in on a consistent basis and continue to call it a crisis when we're part of that. I've heard this said many, many times. This is the slowest moving crisis we've ever seen. This has been consistent. A majority of the years out of the last 20 that more is released than has come in, of course, the reservoirs are going to go down.
Great, thank you. Melly, and then also if folks that are online that have questions, please raise your hand, or trying to think how else you can signify, but there should be a little thing to be noticed. So just let us know. Melly.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that really, really good recap. I don't want to belabor this, but my question is related to Aaron's second question. And what I'm reading is about this continuous repetition that we have the senior water rights. We have the senior water rights. I'm not an expert on the compact, but my understanding is that negotiations, they wanted, Lake Mead. They were senior, there were lengthy negotiations saying, okay, we're going to set aside that priority. And what we're going to do is we're going to distribute the water this way. Am I wrong about that? One. Two, is there a way to counter that? Because I agree with you, Becky, that saying passionately that we're just as important and our rights are just important also has to come with, we have a right to it. This is not we're begging for it. We have a right to it. And does that need to be maybe articulated a little bit more? Because what really hit me is like, no, this is it. We're not just talking about seniority here. The compact is more than that. And it was a compromise where they gave up some of the rights that seniority come in.
I think the very, very important point to be made here is that the compact, the reason the compact came about is because California, leading up to the time it was negotiated, was developing really quickly and developing, what could be at that time under Supreme Court law, senior water rights. And Colorado, Delph Carpenter said, we can't allow that to happen. We can't allow California to develop senior water rights. And there's a Supreme Court decree saying between two states that both recognize prior appropriation, it'll apply across state boundaries. That was the very purpose of the compact, was to make sure that didn't happen, was to say that we are developing a solution that works for the 7 states, that where we set the terms and we are equal under the eyes of the compact. There is no priority in the compact between basins. It is meant to provide equally for the upper basin and lower basin. Mm-hmm. So California may have some arguments with respect to Arizona about priority in the lower basin, of course. They have no priority with respect to Colorado at all. We are on equal footing, and that was the entire purpose of the compact. And that's the reason that the compact remains very important to us today as well. And, I think this is a really important point to make too when we're out talking to people. There are so many people talking about how the compact needs to be renegotiated, how it's flawed. No, it's very important that we maintain the compact and the equity that's guaranteed in it. That is what gives us our right to the river. Now, we all have to recognize we don't have as much as the compact envisioned. It's our obligation to use less when the river doesn't provide, but we should be sharing in the shortages and the surpluses when they exist equally as the compact envisioned.
Kevin? Sure.
I just want to add to that, and I'll be very quick about it, Melly, because your question is so relevant to what I think about so often as the state engineer. And some of you have heard me say this before, but when it comes to that question of priority, I can't say it better than Amy, but I do often get that question about when the lower basin places a call. And I just wince when I hear that term, them placing a call. And I just want to reinforce for all of us that as the state engineer in charge of intrastate administration, I look at one thing, and that's 75 million acre feet in 10 years. And if we're above that, then I'm just doing my normal administration. If we go below that, all that means is that an inquiry is triggered. Mm-hmm. And did we cause, as the upper basin states, cause that to happen? that's an inquiry. I don't know the answer to what that is, but with all the activity, it's really difficult to go through that. So as far as that seniority applying to the upper basin states, I can't say it better than Amy, but I'm just looking at that one thing and ultimately direction from the Upper Colorado River Commission before we're doing anything intrastate in Colorado.
And I think that will not cause peace is critical. One thing I wanted to make sure I say based on your question is that there is, Amy talked about the secretaries is the water master in the lower basin and has a role there. She is not the water master in the upper basin, partly because of the way that we operate and we do things within our states. But that being said, there is a responsibility to the upper basin, that there is equal protections. And I think that is critical. And that is something that we're going to be definitely focusing on as we move forward. There is not just an obligation to protect one state or one part of the basin. There is a responsibility to protect both parts of the basin, the entire basin. And so I think that is something that, as we think about how we move forward in our messaging in a unified way, not only in Colorado, but also across the upper basin states, is that we deserve, and it is our right to be protected.
Sean, and then online we have Barbara. Barbara?
Good morning, everybody. I just had a quick question, and it follows up from some of the press that I've been reading about the conflict between California and the other 6 states. Conjecture that California is just waiting for the federal government to make demands so that they can take it to court, which would be terrible in terms of a delay solution during a crisis. And I'm just curious if behind the curtain, Becky, you think that that is their ploy?
I don't know exactly what their ploy is. Barbara, I know that these are hard decisions for them. I know these are big changes. If you have never had to take less than what you've become accustomed to, it's really hard. We live with that every day, right? So there is not a farmer, rancher, utility, anyone that says, oh, we get to take as much as we want whenever we want, or we can become accustomed to something and know that it's going to be there the next year. There is not one person that knows that in the upper basin states. And so I think that is a big shift for them. And I think it's hard. I think that that's where, and I don't want to belittle that these are hard things for them. I do think that that's part of the way that the upper basin can be helpful. We have built communities and industries based on flexibility and variability. And I think we can be an example, and they should be using kind of the way that we have adjusted. And there's examples across the world that where people are living within the means of what's provided by Mother Nature, that's occurring. I think that's a hard shift for them. I don't know if the motives are as nefarious as you're laying out. I do know that the problem gets more and more complicated. The solutions become more and more complicated the longer it takes to resolve them. One concern I have had is that with a little bit of the moisture that we're seeing, that takes the pedal or the foot off the gas pedal. That doesn't take away from how we got here. 1 year isn't going to solve our issues, but it's important to recognize the issue is using more than what Mother Nature provides on a consistent basis, and not responding quickly enough to the red flags that are being shot out by Mother Nature. And so the answer is I don't know, but I am hoping that there is a level of leadership that says we have to do something regardless. There will probably somebody's going to not be happy. But right now is the best time to take action because it just gets harder and harder to find a solution.
I'm so glad that you're in the seat you're in. I hope your leadership and experience here in Colorado can help show California how to deal with the pain that all are suffering. And just good luck to you with that. And I apologize for having asked such a dark question, but as you say, it's a slow moving crisis. And if they think this year's moisture is a permission to delay, we're all going to be suffering with them. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Either in the room? Ken, it looked like you were contemplating a question earlier. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Just final clarification, because this whole question between prior appropriation and equitable apportionment. So I've clearly heard you say today that the compact defines the water sharing between upper and lower basin as an equitable apportionment, and that the prior appropriation doctrine may play more of a factor between the discussions of Arizona and California about the shortage that they have to deal with, but that it will not come back to be something that Kevin has to deal with as far as a call on the Colorado River, and that would affect the administration in the state of Colorado.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I want to be very careful about our language here, though, because the equitable apportionment doctrine is one that the Supreme Court applies when there's not a compact in place. If you have a couple states that both do prior appropriation, they'll apply prior appropriation. If it's more nuanced than that, the court will use this equitable apportionment doctrine and try to figure out what's fair, essentially. That's not what's happening in the Colorado Basin. We have a compact. And so it sounds like equitable apportionment, but it's really just equality between the basins. So in other words, upper basin and lower basin should get equal shares of the river is what the compact says. So I think you're exactly right. What you're saying, it's just we're careful about using the words equitable apportionment because that's what the Supreme Court would do in the absence of a compact. And if we ended up in the Supreme Court, we would say, look at the compact. It says equal shares of the river. You have very clear guidance on how to handle this situation. Clear enough guidance on how to handle this situation.
Thank you for that clarification. We clearly have the right people at the table.
Thanks. And, one other thing I just wanted to say is that all of your support has been really, really, really important and impactful and has really helped inform Becky's position. And I'm thinking about the Yampa White Green paper. I'm thinking about Ken Curtis coming to our board meeting and sharing his thoughts. And I just wanted to say thank you for all that. It's helpful and we appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions or comments for the folks in the room first, and then we'll see if there's a last call for folks online. Any other questions or comments? Online, any other questions on Colorado River issues? Okay, let's move on to the agenda. But, we've had discussions in the past, and there's always been a lot of questions and concerns and interest in Colorado River issues. And so we've really made it a point to just make this a standing agenda item where, Becky and Amy and others can give us an update. Is that still safe to say that we should continue in that fashion? And great. Yeah, good. Okay, let's move now to member updates, and we'll start with the basins, and then we will move to, if there's time, governor appointees. So let's just go around the room first. And Jeff, let's start with you. And of course, welcome Ken as our newest IBCC member. So welcome, Ken. But Jeff and Ken, I'll turn it over to you two. Okay.
Oh, I am? Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. We're going to start with the Yampa White Green roundtable update for the PEPO committee. I have been stepped into that position since Kelly Romero Heaney was stolen away to the, and I've really enjoyed that. So I want to give you just a quick update. Yampatika plays a huge part of it's an NGO in the Valley that does youth education. They've had over 3,000 contacts with students in Northwest Colorado during the pandemic. They're looking at somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 students they'll be able to reach this year. They'll be in every single elementary, middle, and high school in Northwest Colorado. So they are a real cornerstone of that public outreach that we're doing for youth education. One thing that we're trying new this year that we put into our $25,000 grant, thank you very much for the additional funding, was to secure a couple of new canopies for special events. And this, for like rodeos and parades and fairs and, community events, is a chance for us to set up a presence, a physical presence. And we're busy trying to gather up enough materials for distribution, but we want to have a more, we're going to challenge our roundtable members to actually try to find at least one of those events that they can participate in this year. This is gosh, I wish my eyes were better. Oh, I see what you did. Okay, yes, this goes into one slide. So the other thing was to talk about some work that Russ and his staff have been doing in support of the PEPO initiatives. And there's some concepts of interest that have been developed. And there's 6 of those. I just wanted to briefly mention those. I don't think this is a big discussion, but some of the things that we're considering with the statewide fund that's been set up for support of these types of initiatives. I believe that fund is $225,000. Russ, does that sound right? $225,000 to help support some of these initiatives.
Correct. And then that got increased. So we actually have kind of a balance of $1 million. So we have a lot of money sitting in there for.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So we have some capacity here to do some really, and PEPO is going to play a huge role in the rollout of the state water plan. So capacity building for the educational hub. We have some sort of a proposal for at least an outline of a universal roundtable handbook. We want to make sure that we encourage cross-basin videos, any story maps. We want to try to make sure that we can translate into Spanish some of the most used PEPO resources. We want to make sure that we're providing, like I was just mentioning, the canopies, that we have educational and outreach materials. And then my favorite is this state water plan messaging that we want to try to make sure that we can talk to the general public. We all talk to each other. We talk on a water language that's completely different from what the average person perceives. And if we persist on talking to them the way we talk to each other, we're going to fail in really communicating some of the most key essence of what we have to ask for, not just a universal understanding, but a universal action. So this is a really important concept that we want to explore further. And then finally, the grants. Our grants committee is, we have a really strong leader in there.
Excuse me, can you advance one slide? There he is.
Thank you. So the grants committee is really trying to have a much more robust process. Yeah, and this has been it's really one of the most critical things that we do is to try to, vet and bring forward good proposals for you to consider at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So a lot of this is just following up on your challenge to develop stream management plans and to take what happened to the BIP proposals that we put in the state water plan. Are they moving forward? Do we have, just try to offer some technical support? We want to make sure that we've also addressed accountability and also finally give a showcase for projects that have been completed. We'll talk about the successes that we've had. So we're in the middle of that discussion. I'll let you know how that all works out. Thank you.
So from a Big River perspective, sure. Do I have a
turn your mouth? Oh, yeah.
I noticed that you didn't put a microphone near me. Okay, so from a Big River perspective, I think each of you received a copy of our position paper on the river in crisis, and I want to preface just a quick comment with that. To a person, if you were to poll the 33 members of the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, they would say that we deeply appreciate the efforts of Director Mitchell and the negotiating team and what they've been able to accomplish. So it's in no way should anyone infer that our thinking about this and wanting to understand what's important to us is a criticism of the work that the negotiating team has done. Congratulations and thanks. You guys have been warriors, and we appreciate you. We had a great session reviewing that with Lisa and Metro and Rick and the Metro RT. We're trying to get scheduled to do that also with Gunnison. If any of the rest of you are interested in a more detailed conversation about that, we are happy to support that. Ken and I can be had at a moment's notice. So with that, I think that kind of wraps it up unless anyone has questions from there.
All right. Any questions for Yampa White Green? Any perspectives on a big snow year so far? I mean, I was looking at the numbers, and as far as right now, I think I saw 138%.
Yeah.
However, Joanne may have something to say from Gunnison Basin, where they're also at 138% right now.
Yeah.
So they're catching up.
Yeah, we're moving snow at the ranch just about every day. Dan.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I did say, though, I was talking with the neighbor the other day, and we're not in a position to complain about any precip, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to hold that line. So probably by March, you'll hear the old guy start to complain.
We'll see where we are on May 1st.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for these updates. I appreciate it. Next up, Rick, you want to give updates too for Metro?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start, and then Lisa, you can chime in. So a couple things. One, just thank you for coming to the Metro and sharing your paper. We had a good discussion on that. And, some of the feedback that we heard at Metro is, and it kind of ties in with what Becky had mentioned, how can we be unified and how can we show support for the state and Amy and Becky and the negotiating team. So, however, that's kind of where the Metro wants to make sure that we're supportive of your efforts and do whatever we can to do that. So the other thing that I'll just touch on before passing over to Lisa is one of the projects that we're working on in the Metro Basin is in line with the landscape transformation. So we had signed Denver Water, Aurora Water, Castle Rock, and 30 some other municipalities signed an MOU to one of the main goals of that is to reduce non-functional turf by 30%. So Denver Water is working on a program. Aurora has already passed some policies to limit turf. And then the Metro Basin, we're looking at kind of three things. What are different entities doing? So what's Aurora's program look like? What is Denver's, and so on and so forth, kind of across the Front Range and maybe even the state. And then is it, is the industry ready for this great influx of transforming the landscape to more Colorado-scape or sustainable landscapes? And what are public's thoughts on this as well? So we're kind of scoping that out, hoping to have something pulled together to bring in front of our Water Supply Reserve Committee, and then the full roundtable for endorsement and moving forward on that. And Lisa, anything else?
I was trying to frantically put together a PowerPoint, which I think you guys have lifted the bar. So no, really nothing to add. We really did have a good conversation after our presentation, and I apologize that some of the AV issues probably didn't allow you to hear a lot of the discussion, but we really appreciated having you come and having that conversation, because you really made it a discussion, and think people really appreciated it being a dialogue. So we appreciate that, and we'd like to invite any and all other roundtables to come and visit with us, because I think that that's one of the keys, is that we're ambassadors. We're supposed to be reaching across the basin. So thank you.
Great. Any questions? Okay. Thanks so much. Sean, what's going on at the South Platte?
Thank you. And we have Sean Chambers, so it's the Sean Show, not the other word show. So we've had a few things going on in the South Platte. Fire is something that folks are very focused on. There's a Northern Colorado Fireshed group that has been set up, and they're actively collaborating, similar to a roundtable or an IBCC type of process focused on fire issues, pre-fire mitigation. Lots of pursuit of funding of federal funds that we'll hear about later this afternoon. On that topic, quite a few folks in the South Platte Basin have pursued the NRCS PL 566 funding, including St. Brandon Left-Hand Water Conservancy District, and I'm excited about the opportunities to really get significant dollars in to implement these water-related projects. Like many of you, sitting in rooms talking about all these awesome challenges we have in front of us, and somebody will inevitably raise their hand and say, so how are you going to pay for it? And finally, for once in my career, I can say we have an answer. So that's exciting. The roundtable had its meeting last night and adapted its WSRF guidelines to accompany some of the changes at the CWCB level, particularly with deferred maintenance. I don't know how the other roundtables have looked at that in the past, but the South Platte Basin Roundtable has had a culture of the state dollars should not go towards deferred maintenance. That's the responsibility of the mutual ditch company or the water right holders. Recognizing the, as I said earlier, the awesome challenge in front of us, particularly with maintenance, and recognizing the benefits that are associated with the upgrades to those systems. The South Platte Roundtable voted unanimously last night to amend those guidelines. So that's going to be a change for us. Lastly, quite a bit on the education front. Some changes to the website and some videos. We have our PEPO liaison and education team working on that, and they reported that their greatest compliment was one of our longstanding roundtable members said it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that is high praise in her regard. Of if you hadn't had a chance to check that out, it's on the South Platte Basin Roundtable's website. The third party hosted one, not the CWCB site. But it's a really nicely done video, and I think the story is applicable statewide. Sean, anything to add?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to join you all virtually this afternoon. And I thought I would just share, ongoing work at the roundtable has focused also around membership and re-engaging our roundtable membership following the COVID situation. We're back to about 50% capacity, but we continue to find that good collaboration and relationship building requires in-person attendance. We've also had seats go vacant and been challenged to refill them. And so we're on a push to fill those seats and to create the relationships that I think the Water for the 21st Century Act envisioned. We're moving ahead with the implementation of the Basin Implementation Plan, working with our neighbors at the Metro Roundtable to identify pathways for the goals and measurable outcomes in the BIP to be addressed more routinely with WSRF projects. As Sean noted, we amended our WSRF process and the opportunity to make sure that aging infrastructure gets its appropriate amount of funding. And, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the importance of the Colorado Water Plan grants and how they serve as a complementary piece of that funding matrix. So we're very appreciative of that money. And then we have been intentional about adding a regular check-in on the Big River conversation. The Colorado River water resource is such an important piece of the South Platte Basin and every type of use within the basin, that we're routinely checking in on that to generally drive awareness and make sure that our membership understands the importance of being a collaborative group that can stand behind the commissioner and support her work. So we're doing that at each meeting. And with that, I'd conclude the remarks regarding the South Platte Roundtable.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean, both Seans. Appreciate that. And Sean Cronin, it was great to see you last week. A really exciting announcement with the Undersecretary of Agriculture being in town and announce a commitment of a little over $35 million for strategic areas around the state for fuels mitigation work. And so I thought that was real positive. So, and I'm really happy to see the water community too, all invited as well, or at least some folks that could be there. So that's great. Let's instead of kind of going back and forth on who's online and who's in person, let's just focus on who's in the room first, and then we'll move to online. So next, let's move to governor appointee updates. And how about Melly? And then we'll just kind of go around with Pat and then with Aaron. Thanks.
Sure. And I'm hoping I can't even see who's online, so I can also give the South West, because I sit in the Southwest roundtable. If there's nobody there, I don't know who's there. There. Okay, so they can give that. Okay. Just a couple of, I guess, broader perspectives. I really like what's going on. I mean, it is a slow moving crisis, and that gives you an opportunity to actually maybe do things a little better than an actual has to happen yesterday. So I'm hearing from the Metro in a roundtable talking about just supporting and talking about municipal type of conversation dealing with outdoor irrigation and that kind of thing. I think that's just the right place to go. That is absolutely what needs to be addressed. There is a lot going on in dealing with agricultural conservation, which is a little more touchy and a little more difficult, but there are things going on, I think, that are really exciting, particularly looking at different kinds of crop, looking if alternative crop for forage is an alternative out there. And what I really like about that is that it has the positive benefit of showing that Colorado is doing something, and has the positive benefit of hopefully saving some water. But most importantly is I think it's a way to allow agricultural operations to succeed, even though water resources are becoming more and more scarce. And it is a way for people to look at alternative ways of doing business so they can stay in business. So for me, that's really exciting, because it doesn't matter where the water ends up. I mean, I would hope that ends up in in-stream flows, because that's my focus, or, going towards a long-term solution for our interstate issues. But I think that's really exciting. I think there's a lot going on, and I'm involved in a couple of projects where we're trying to get our arms around all that is going on, because people are doing this on their own. There are programs out there where people are doing this. We're trying to get a sense of who's doing what. And I think that once we have a better sense of that, having the roundtables distribute that information and educate folks about what's available is a pretty critical point. And it just occurred to me today. I wasn't even thinking about it before, but it is a really good place to distribute that information. The other thing I was thinking about is the success of all this money coming in and the matching funds that the CWCB is making available, the federal funds available, this whole program to build capacity. The roundtable in the Southwest hasn't taken on projects on their own, but certainly have provided support for sub-basin groups and watershed groups to do the work. And I'm involved in a group in the San Juan River, and we have a slew of projects that are getting ready to go. They're all, created within the basin. They're all like grassroots, and they're starting to get ready to go. And that support that we get in building capacity is critical. We can't do it. We're all volunteers, really. So we can't do it without it. Anyway, those are the two things I just wanted to address. I'm pretty optimistic, actually, looking at all that stuff going on. So thanks.
Thanks, Melly. Appreciate that. Pat?
Yeah, thanks, Director Gibbs. Really good conversation this morning. And I just wanted to point out a few things. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks and months to be able to reconnect and have lunch or coffee with a bunch of different folks, whether they're former roundtable members, current roundtable members, former IBCC members, and just members in the water community. And what I found interesting is probably 4 or 5 of those times, just out of nowhere, there's kind of been this question posed to me of, doesn't it seem like we're getting along better as a state? Or don't you think at least when we disagree, we're more civil about how we disagree? And they're just real honest questions about why that is. And I do think that the level of education around these issues, kind of a common challenge that we are all facing around water supply shortage, and then just, almost 20 plus years of being able to have these conversations and build relationships and be in these forums has really proven to bear fruit and is going to serve us well as we have to have even more challenging conversations. So I just wanted to point that out, that was a theme that came up around a lot of the coffee discussions I was having, as well as I really do think that there is an increased level of awareness and knowledge of water issues, and that there is a more informed public and citizenry than we've had at any time since I've been in the business, right down to moving into a new house. During one of the breaks, I had a 15-minute conversation with one of the movers around the Colorado River situation. And this guy was like right on target with understanding, some of the basics of what we're up against here. So I think that's really neat, and a testament to the work of the state and the work of all of you and really the saturation of the media around some of these challenges that we see with the press. So I think we need to keep that up and continue to tell Colorado's story. And then the other 2 things that I would mention is just I'm really seeing, and I'm fortunate to kind of get to learn now about some new systems and some new basins and stuff. And I'm really learning a lot about how important Colorado River supplies are to each and every one of us. And some basins, you may have cities that are 50% reliant on Colorado River supplies on the Front Range, or 70%. There are communities that are almost exclusively reliant on Colorado River supplies, both on the Front Range and then obviously on the West Slope. So we do have a lot that brings us together and unites us, and we do need to kind of solve those problems together. And so I think it's really good if you have that extra time to kind of get to know the other basins a little bit and really study those challenges. And then the only other thing that I would mention is we don't live with a big reservoir above us that's a structural reservoir, but we do live in many cases in watersheds and in areas where we do have that snowpack above us. And so I think it's really important to be leveraging and utilizing those technologies like the Airborne Snow Observatory and LIDAR and these new kind of emerging technologies, and investing the resources to understand what that snowpack reservoir looks like and how it runs off and what it does to soil moisture and stuff as things run off, so we can better predict how we can live within our means from year to year. So I guess I just like to put in a plug for that. And I know, Sean and his crew and others around the state are really strong advocates for that. And I think that's important throughout the state to be leaning in on that. So that's what I've got today.
Great. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate that. Aaron.
Thanks. Being, one of the last appointees to speak, a lot of what I wanted to say has been covered. One thing I wanted to mention, that many of you or some of you were at the water plan celebration a couple of weeks ago, which was really a great event. Even though Becky kept telling me to stop talking, it was a great event, and it was fair. It was a great event.
Telling you to stop talking
very politely and calmly.
My voice came out.
But I think that, and to those of us in the back, it was great to see everybody in person, and it was a real celebration. But it was an exciting day. I've got my water bottle here, so I think it's worth celebrating. And so that was something that it was great to see many of you at. So sorry if I was a little chatty. I also, I think I mentioned this to some of you. I've heard a couple of new legislators have reached out and ask questions about, well, how do we, from our communities, how do we access all of these CWCB resources? And I've suggested that, the state just hired new staff out in the basins. I don't know if those connections have been made, but it justifies, I think, the importance of having those folks to say, hey, there is somebody that you can talk to. Maybe there's more that's needed, but it was clearly a gap, and it's great that those 4 people, I think, are on board. So I think that'll really help, having people in those communities to advance the goals, to make sure people are aware of the funding, kind of preach the water plan gospel. So good to hear that other people were like, hey, I need this. And it was easy for me to say, well, that exists now. That person is there. Hopefully it works out. Kind of echoing what Melly and Pat said, it's been great seeing what appears to be more of kind of a collaborative approach, a recognition of, at least we all in Colorado, and maybe all of us in 6 states, are in this together, and we're trying to do what we can. The muni conservation discussions are great, and particularly meaningful. I know it was, I thought, nice to hear the governor highlighting that in his State of the State, the importance of kind of incorporating conservation into land use planning. That'll be an interesting legislative fight, but I was happy to hear him pointing out how important that can be, recognizing it won't resolve the situation. It's still important to show that that's happening. Really excited also to see the continued significant focus on wildfire mitigation and kind of upland reforestation and restoration. And to Pat's point, I mean, that is really important in protecting water infrastructure and also making sure that the snowpack we have stays there and is available in the streams later in the season when we need it, so it doesn't all just run off burnt slopes. So that nexus is critical, and I'm just so excited to see a continued investment in that from the administration and really from everybody in the state recognizes how important that is. And the only other thing I'll mention is, from the Nature Conservancy's perspective, Amy mentioned the system conservation pilot project, and we've been having conversations with landowners with whom we work, folks where we have a conservation easement on their property, looking at our own properties to see, are there places where it would be appropriate to engage in that program, just like we did however many years ago the last program was, and making sure people are aware of it, if there's an interest in helping them access the program. So that's a role I hope we're playing in a useful way. And again, I'm sorry for chatting by the bar, but it was really great to see everybody. And I'm just still happy. I know it's, we're getting out of the COVID situation, but it does suggest how excited we all are to talk to folks about this topic. So I probably will do it again next time, but it was good to see y'all.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. That was a great event. It looks like, Bo, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to make a quick statement, if I could, as a representative.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
What it is that I'm out here in the boondocks a lot in the upper parts of the state, and I talk to a lot of ag people and just people kind of generally neighbors and things like that. And I find that the interbasin water crisis education has certainly caught hold out here. People know of it, but they don't know a lot about it. And what really seems to affect them is what affects them right now, right here. Like, we've got all the snow, and now they're all going to be wondering, well, is that going to fix everything? Well, no, but that's what they're all going to be wondering. And there's also a lot of resentment for the lower basin using all the water that is basically our water. That's how these people feel around here. So I just wanted to mention those couple of things that, the populace certainly needs more education out here, but they're aware of what's going on and they do have some opinions.
Great. Thanks, Bo. Okay, let's move to folks that are online for the basins, and we'll start, how about with Southwest? I know Ken and Al are online, so what's going on in the Southwest?
Thanks, Director.
And then after and then in the queue we'll have Barbara with North Platte right after you all.
Great. Thanks, Director Gibbs. Snow is the news. We're doing really well in the mountains, but all the other cylinders are hitting in the sense that we had monsoons last year, so our soil moisture is up. There's probably 8 to 12 inches out my window. So the snow extends well into New Mexico and southeast Utah. So these storms have been really beneficial. Having said that, I think it's played into some of our COVID recovery. We've started our roundtable meetings in person, of course, with the hybrid option. And the last roundtable meeting hit right during those January storms. And they have definitely taken some work. I had an hour and a half this morning getting out of the driveway. So it's that good kind of trouble that we're having. Hopefully we'll have a well attended meeting in April. With that said, we're doing some work on our website. I think I've heard a lot of adjustment to the new grant process and portal, and want to thank Jeff and others at CWCB. They've been great to work with us. Our water plan grant coordination, somebody mentioned water plan grants. I think they're great. Unfortunately, our schedules don't mesh, so we're always scrambling around getting support for our water plan grant applicants, but I think we'll get that sorted out. Colorado River Issues Committee continues to meet and have great discussions. We're going to have Perry Cabot back with some more findings later this year. Of course, Amy and Michelle have attended every one and kept us informed. So I think that's done a lot for basin education. And then from there, we go out to our various local groups. Big event for Southwestern Colorado, the March 31st Southwestern Water Conservation District seminar happens down at Ignacio. I will point out it's grown so big they had to leave Durango. Thankfully, Ignacio and the casino down there has facilities for us. Catching up with a couple of comments made, I think Becky was right. With all this snow, we'll take our blessing this year. But with that said, I don't think farmers and some of the other water users are going to give up on some of these initiatives that we've been trying. And that's at least locally on the west side over here. That's from the Ute Mountain Ute tribe up through farmers that have been heavily shorted the last few years. I also think Melly made an important point for the Southwest. Capacity is huge in these rural communities. CWCB, kudos for grabbing one of our connected people for your field liaison. I understand Laura's stuck over in the Rio Grande Valley. There was that little nuance where you make her run back and forth over Wolf Creek Pass, and this was not the day to do that, or yesterday was not. Having said that, we're all working on our capacity. I see it here locally and around the basin with water folks that I work with. We are passing out grants. With that, Al and I have been discussing, it is a little difficult to focus on a single one or two projects as we have 9 individual basins, but I think they're all participating, and anybody coming forward, I think we've been supportive of, and we're trying to get the word out, and we expect to see continued grants from all across the Southwest. With that, I'll kick it over to Al if he's got any catch up.
Well, yeah, I guess you mentioned in our website revision of that, and I think it's gone real well. Added a couple things, and I know our whip representative was at Colorado Water Congress talking about the workbook that she put together. You know, I'll say kind of a benefit of COVID that she developed that in place of doing some of the outreach things that we typically do. And then we'll additional outreach thing, having a water festival, hopefully this May for all the different schools here in the basin. And then just somewhat emphasizing what Ken and then also Melly talked about as far as being able to utilize the various grants that are available here on the east side and the upper San Juan. I think we've made real excellent progress in implementing our stream management plan, integrated water management plan. And like Melly said, we have a couple projects that basically ready to sign the contracts and get to work with design work. So appreciate all the support from the roundtable as well as CWCB. And we've gotten some federal money in there and are also working on trying to incorporate Public Law 566 into some of our efforts for ag improvements. So just, I guess that's about it, in addition to what, just reiterating what Ken was saying. So I think that's it from the Southwest.
Great. Thanks so much, Alan. Ken, any questions for the Southwest? Okay, see none. Let's move to North Platte with Barbara, and then in the queue, we'll have Arkansas.
Thanks so much, Director Gibbs. We've been enjoying the largesse of this winter, lots of snow, so much so I've occasionally been snowed out and snowed in. But the big concern, of course, is that we don't have a early spring since there's a minimum storage in the basin to be able to take advantage of that runoff. I was very encouraged by the Yampa White Greens update on PEPO, and it re-energizes me to work with our chair, Ty Wattenberg, to fill this long empty slot of PEPO rep and outreach coordinator for our basin. That is really important given all the education required and funding opportunities that exist from CWCB. In terms of the activities within the basin, it has focused on the BIP major effort to address irrigation infrastructure. So grants have been approved for irrigation infrastructure and small improvements to storage capacity and capability. But there are lots of other areas in our BIP goals that must be addressed if we have an even hand in that work, and look forward to helping do that over the next year or so. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much. Next up is Arkansas, and it's kind of hard to see who is here. I think Juris is on. Okay, yeah, of course. The witness protection. Yeah, Juris, the floor is yours, and I'm not sure if Tim's on as well. So after Arkansas, then we'll have Colorado.
Well, thank you very much. I get tired of hearing all of you talk about how much snow you have. Here in the Ark Basin, we're at about 85% of normal, but there is some good news. I can barely see across the street this morning in La Junta. So we're getting a pretty good blizzard going. Consistent with Director Gibbs' direction to pick a project in your basin and support it, the Ark Basin has selected the Ark Valley Conduit. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It was a component of the Frying Pan, Arkansas project, but was never funded until recently. And its purpose is to bring fresh, good drinking water to about 40 communities from Pueblo down to the state line. And fortunately, we've had some good funding from our congressional delegation, and we'll be turning some dirt, I think, this summer. Another activity that the Roundtable's been doing, we took a long look at our BIP project list and found that there was a lot of redundancy, and we found a lot of projects that we couldn't even identify a sponsor. For example, Colorado Parks and Wildlife had over 200 projects listed in the BIP. But when you talk to the folks there at CPW, nobody even knows where these projects came from or who was trying to push them. I don't know how they got there, but anyway, we're going to start sorting those out and refining our project list. The Ark River Watershed Coalition, we're approaching $1 million in terms of grants. And that's really a very viable program that's moving ahead throughout the basin in terms of watershed treatment, fire suppression, all kinds of interesting items there. And we expanded our PPO membership. Aurora, of course, is a major player in the Ark Basin in terms of their Trans Mountain diversions and in terms of their by and dry water that they take up to Aurora. So we added a representative from Aurora to the PPO board. And we also brought in a private consultant from GEI, who's a major specialist. She is a real top drawer water quality expert. And given the issues in the Ark Basin in terms of water quality, we thought that this would be a very beneficial addition to our PPO board. That's about it, unless somebody has a question.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, great. And is Tim online too? Does Tim have anything to add? I'm not sure. It's just hard to tell.
I am here. I have nothing to add. I think Jairus done an excellent job in covering where the basin roundtable is at.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Tim. Okay, let's move to the Colorado, and either Stan or Carlisle, or also potentially Andy Mueller too, as a governor rep for the Colorado River. But again, I just can't. Oh, we have Stan. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
I
Stan,
need to stand because here I've got a little problems with my video, I think, going one way or the other. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Before I get to a few quick snippets on behalf of the Colorado River Basin, I think it'd be perfectly appropriate to note that all the things that Becky's done with respect to supporting the Colorado River Basin as well as the state of Colorado is deeply appreciated. She once again made a presentation at the Colorado River Water Use Association convention in December, and people really appreciated getting all that information and knowing what was happening. And quite frankly, I think she needs a lot of accolades because honestly, what she's been able to do in that 6 participant letter, including basically evaporation and the inclusion of Arizona and Nevada, was something that we did not really foresee. So very happy with where that's going. And we hearken back to the old days where California, when they had to come down from 4.7 million acre feet to 4.4. I think what the representative said at that point in time, not another drop. So it's a tough negotiation and it's really appreciated. I would point out for some of those people, since it's been mentioned so many times, with respect to the compact, that there's an excellent book by Dan Tyler from CSU about Delph Carpenter that gives an excellent background on exactly what's involved in the compact, and that might be useful for a number of people. As far as our roundtable meeting, one in January, projects continue to be moving forward. Obviously, the Windy Gap bypass is, even though not funded by the roundtable, something that's very important, and is, all the construction activity has been great. We basically moved forward on a Grand Junction pipeline improvements, discussed Snake River improvements to go back for many years that are necessary, and also discussed about another few projects moving forward. So we're making hopefully adequate progress in trying to spend the money that's being made available. And that's about it, unless Carlisle has something to add now.
Great, thanks, Stan. Appreciate that. Carlisle, anything you want to add?
I'll try. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
My broadband is about to lose connection, I think, because all the snow we're getting. But yeah, the other thing I might mention, we did approve a significant amount of money for the aerial snow observation projects and trying to measure snow that way. You know, I'm right in the heart of where we're getting very heavy snow. I think the snowpack on Grand Mesa was about 165% of normal 2 days ago, and I've had 36 hours of steady snow now. There's a snow stake along Highway 65 on Colorado Highway 65 on Grand Mesa that's 10 feet tall. Over the weekend, it was 8.5 feet, and I'm told that now it's under the snow. So there's more than 10 feet of snow where the snow stake is. The ground's wet under that. So we're looking really great for this year, but you know, 1 year is not going to fix all the drought problems we have. So, but we're certainly encouraged of where we're at right now.
Great. Thanks for those updates. And also I want to see if Andy Mueller wants to add anything as well, Governor appointee.
Yeah, thank you, Director Gibbs. Andy Mueller here. I apologize. I tended to be at the meeting about 3 hours ago. I've had some travel related difficulties. But I want to just maybe reiterate just a couple things. And one, I want to thank Becky Mitchell and Amy and Lane and the team from the state in the negotiations. And I think, you know, I think one of the things that Amy touched on and I think articulated well, but that we in Colorado can't allow the press to miss is that accounting for evaporation in the lower basin, accounting for system loss in the lower basin is consistent with the law of the river. There is been an interpretation or an application of that law by the Bureau that we in Colorado have always believed is incorrect. And it's really critical that we make sure that people in not only our state, but the country as a whole understand that we are actually sticking by the law of the river. We are defending the prior appropriation system within our state. We certainly wouldn't concede that. But that within the within the basin, the evaporative loss and transit loss have been incorrectly not attributed to the contractors down the lower basin. And had that simple fix been done just 22 years ago, we would all be sitting here with reservoirs that were at least half full in the Colorado River Basin. And I think that can't be stressed enough, that that accounting fix that we now have 6 states arguing for is really critical. Arizona looks at it as an equity issue, and they're not a big fan of the seniority system in the lower basin. But that's not our issue. That's not where we come at it. This is just a simple consistency of application of federal law that we're looking for. And I think everybody in our state really needs to make sure that we articulate that well. And then would also say, I agree completely with everybody who's talked about the movement that we're making as a state in all of our basins and sectors towards greater water efficiency and conservation. And I would say, in the Colorado basin, with the help of our both the roundtable money and the water plan money, as well as the Colorado River District's CFP fund, we have been funding water conservation programs and investigations and applications in every sector throughout our district, and some real innovative research as well on not only on helping with ASO and soil moisture, but also with dealing with other crop switching and figuring out how to intelligently and systematically implement some of these programmatic water conservation programs that will not only protect the river and the health of the river and the health of our agricultural economy, but it will protect our state in the long run. And I think we're heading very much in the right direction, and just want to let everybody understand that from our perspective, we've got a lot of work to do, but if we continue to work together, we'll get there. So thank you, Dan.
Great. Thanks, Andy. We appreciate that. Next up is Gunnison, and I think Joanne's online, and then the Rio Grande is next after Gunnison.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. We've been working on supporting a number of projects that are intended to improve efficiencies, and one of the Gunnison Basin's primary goals in their BIP is to protect all of the existing structures and make sure that we're not losing our ability to store and handle water because of aging infrastructure. And we've supported a number of projects that are aimed at that goal. Most of them also have multi-purpose to protect the fish transport and improve measurement and water use efficiencies. On the grant side, we've spent a lot of the last couple of meetings talking about the changes in the rules or interpretation of the rules regarding how the Water Supply Reserve Fund is to be used, and have expressed our concerns to staff in trying to get those resolved. On the education front, the basin is trying to use a lot of the funds we have gotten for PEPO is aimed at outreach to young people. Colorado Mesa has a really amazing water exhibit, and we're using funds to try to get all of the school kids in all of the different districts in our basin the opportunity to take kids to go see those exhibits. We're also doing a little bit of work on our website, trying to get more people engaged with what's going on with water. And as everybody else has talked about, snowpack so far is looking good. It really depends what happens in March. Their storms have been real hit or miss. In parts of the upper Gunnison are way above normal, and parts of it are just sort of normal. At the last meeting, we had a presentation about some of the technologies that Colorado talked about, and are interested in being able to get a better handle on what is happening across the basin, rather than just having a couple of sites that we need to plan with. I think that's about it. What's going on?
Great. Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate that. Any questions for the Gunnison? Okay, let's move to the Rio Grande, and I think Nathan's online.
Yeah, I'm here. I was just going to let you know we're real pleased with what's happening to everything relative to the Rio Grande. We're in a good spot. We've got some good things happening as far as our funding. At yesterday's roundtable, we approved, preliminary approved almost $1.5 million worth of new projects coming through. So the basin has taken to heart the challenge to start using these funds and to keep on top of this availability. We've got a better inclusivity in our basin than we've had for quite a while. We've struggled to keep some of our southeastern members coming. It's a long way for them to travel to the meetings. But yesterday we had 2 projects from the San Luis and the Costilla area. So we're real proud about what's going on there. I do want to make a shout out. I think Robert Sakata has been at every one of our meetings zoomed in, and we appreciate that cross basin concern in his comments. He's always welcome, and we appreciate that support. Also, as a basin, we wanted to congratulate Russ and his team on the water plan. We had a presentation yesterday from Emma and Heather, on the importance of it, and what a big leap that was for us moving forward on understanding where Colorado is. Also want to thank Heather for, now that her term has expired on CWCB, she represented our board, or our basin, excuse me, extremely well. We felt like we got just about everything we needed out of that, to have communication and have back and forth that we needed with CWCB and the Rio Grande. So we appreciate the effort she put in there. And then finally, we've been looking, just like Sean Chambers said, we're looking to keep all of our seats full. We struggle with some of our seats and keeping good quality people there. It just seems like there's a lot of turnover, but we've kind of started a concerted effort there. And also we want to start doing more on our cross basin tours to try to help understand more of the issues that are happening, especially on the Colorado and some of the other areas. So, you know, to say the worst place to be is between someone and their lunch. So that's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. And yeah, we thank Director Sakata for also joining us in this meeting today, as well as Director Heather Dutton. So so thanks to those CWCB board members. Can't really tell if there's other ones that are online. I think that's it for right now. Did I miss anyone? Any of the governor appointees? Try to not miss anyone, but want to make sure that we gathered everyone that's, I know we covered everyone here, but online. We got him. We also have Lee Miller here, right in the back here with Southeastern. Raise your hand.
Just here to enjoy the IBCC artwork, watching. So he's the
Great.
only non-staff.
Okay. Let's take a break for lunch. At 12:30, there will be a tour of this facility. And Russ, where do we meet for that?
Elizabeth, we're just going to meet downstairs, right? Oh, she's coming up here. Great. So
Okay,
Edith is
12:30, be here, but we will come back. Is 15 minutes enough for a tour? We're scheduled to come back at 12:45.
here.
Make that work?
Make it 15, 20.
Okay.
Push it.
Let's come back at 12:50. So 12:50, everyone. Okay, thanks, everyone. We'll take a break. Okay, we are back, everyone. We apologize for the delay. We just had a really fantastic tour of this facility, and glad to be back. The next agenda item that we have is a panel discussion on advancements in funding and capacity. So we have first Anna Moss, who will discuss the regional water plan grant manager updates as well as capacity building, and then we have Nate Pearson, who will discuss the infrastructure and IRA bills, and then Kelly Romero-Heaney, who will give us a legislative update. So Anna, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Okay, now we're on. Great, thanks. Thanks, Director Gibbs. Yes, I'll give a quick update, not only on just the water plan grant regional team, but also just a couple of quick staffing updates for you all. So as you know, we've hired regionally based water plan grant managers. And so their primary role really is to help us administer the water plan grant program, with that receiving this permanent stream of revenue through sports betting, which we are certainly grateful for, and potentially some additional general goes well through the legislative process. We'll have a fair bit of money to administer. And so having folks based in the regions is helpful to us because they can work with applicants on the front end, really help them navigate those funding channels also. I mean, water plan grants are one of many opportunities that we have at the CWCB, but if it's not the right resource, then they can certainly help coach people around other funding opportunities too. So I'll kind of just go around clockwise around the state. Names, they're all on our website also. But North Platte, South Platte Metro is Jackie Doust. She's based out of Evergreen. In the Arkansas Basin, based out of Salida, is Lauren Duncan. Southwest and Rio Grande, based out of Durango, is Laura Spann. And then Ashley Garrison is based out of Breckenridge. She's covering Colorado, Gunnison, and Yampa White Green. And so certainly if there are connections that need to be made in your basins and you want some introductions, reach out to me or reach out to them directly. I'm happy to help facilitate those conversations. if there's opportunities for them to get in front of more folks. We've been doing a few funding 101s with different entities or just different ways for them to get more engaged in those communities. So happy to help facilitate that anytime for sure. Also kind of along the staffing, just a little bit of a friendly update, and Director Gibbs may have shared this at a previous meeting, but Daphne Gervais is the new ledge liaison for the DNR. And so as we're in the legislative session, if there are things of legislative importance, kind of go through Daphne first. CWCB is certainly, happy to participate, but really she's the contact on all of those things. And then kind of tying into the capacity building side of things, we also have hired Michael Reagan to help administer all of our ARPA funds that we've received. There's, as you all know, when you have federal dollars, unique strings attached that is a little bit out of our normal wheelhouse, additional reporting requirements. So Michael is helping me with all of those efforts. And so on that capacity building side, we have federal technical assistance grants summing to a total of $5 million. The intent of these programs is to help really get folks in a good spot to apply for a federal grant. And so that is our goal, is to get as many federal grant applications in as possible so we can bring as many federal dollars into Colorado and advance water projects. And so that $5 million was split into two different categories, one that we're calling local capacity, one that we're calling CWCB technical assistance. Both have the exact same end goal, get to that federal ask. The local capacity, those are grants that go direct to entities that already have either a contractor, they might have an engineer, a grant writer, they already have those relationships. They just need to hire someone to help them get to that point in time. The CWCB technical assistance is just about up and running. We ran into a few little contracting hiccups, but we've got a contractor selected and are just kind of finalizing a few little pieces there. But effectively, it's a similar process, but it's for someone who doesn't have an engineer, doesn't have a grant writer, doesn't really even know where to start. They might have a project concept. They'll come to us and say, hey, here's the project idea I have. We're going to evaluate that. Does it align with CWCB's goals, the goals of the water plan? Do we think there's a federal opportunity at the end of this that we can help them with? And then they would tap into our CWCB contractor and use that resource rather than hiring their own. So those are the two sides of that. A few things to note on those. They are federal dollars. So to access those, entities must be registered with SAMS.gov, which takes a minute. So we're telling folks, just go ahead and get registered now if you might apply for any of those funds. And that's required for us to get through the controller's office. They have to make sure that you can actually receive federal dollars. So there's a limit there. All of the funds must be contracted by the end of 2024 and spent by December of 2026. So there is a little bit of a short fuse on these ARPA funds. I think those are kind of the key things that are different from our normal programs. Both of those are rolling application deadlines. We do those, accept them at any time, and then they're at Director Mitchell's approval letter once we get through all of the staff review and staff recommendations. So that's kind of it on the capacity side of things. And I'll pause and see if you've got questions, but otherwise, I know we're kind of short on time today. Certainly feel free to reach out to me at any time or any of my staff, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Any questions for Anna? Yeah, Sean.
Anna, on the capacity to help folks that maybe don't have the skill sets to apply for some of these federal dollars, to put a finer point on it, is there a readiness for ditch companies that might seek those funds and don't necessarily even have their ideas fully baked yet to even say this is what we want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is, the short answer is yes. The more detailed answer is really how that process works. So right now we have a pretty high level intake form on our portal that will go live as soon as we get the rest of this contracting figured out in the next couple of weeks here. And so in that sense, we're going to ask, what are your project ideas? If they just have, a high level idea so we can understand, yes, as an alignment with the water plan, we think this can work, then what we'll do is we'll evaluate that. We'll bring in the contractor. It's a firm out of Boulder called Apt. They have several subs they can tap into. And so from there, we'll have a consultation and really try to distill down what are your project needs. Apt will go through and put together a scope of work and a budget. We'll go back to that ditch company or whomever and say, hey, here's kind of what we think it would cost. Here's where we think we can help you. Do you want to engage? Because there is a 25% match required, which I should have mentioned earlier. So at that point in time, then the ditch company can say yay or nay. But certainly, I think those are the kind of folks that we should be reaching out to.
25% match just to receive the assistance to go for the grant that could provide. Yep. 25% match just to receive the assistance prior to obtaining the grant that could actually get the work done.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Millie.
Thanks. Just a quick question. Some of these federal agencies have, and I can't remember the acronym, but they have requirements for consultants to register with their program. I know NRCS has it. I think BOR may too. And it really discourages consultants because they pay less and it's kind of burdensome. Are you subject to any of those requirements to when you give money out for consultants?
We are not on the ARPA funds that we are paying for this technical assistance side. So, but that could come into play though, I suppose, on that end project once they're in the implementation.
When you go into the full engineering and stuff?
Right. But from our side, from the technical assistance, that does not come into play.
Correct. Right. Thanks.
Are there questions? Any questions from folks online? Okay. Yeah, Ken.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm just wondering if you could clarify if there's within the scope of the duties of these regional coordinators that are helping with the water plan grants, is there any capacity to assist with the WSRF, or I mean, how broad is their scope of work, or is it staying very narrow around just the state water plan funds?
That's an excellent question. So their primary focus really is the administration of the water plan grants, primarily because of the volume that we're getting in. And once we even get through, review, board approval, contracting, administration, there's just a lot to that life cycle. That said, we are working really hard on making sure that they're connected with all of the other funders around the state, and so they can help provide some guidance to folks as they're navigating different funding opportunities. And so I think that to the extent that they've got time available, they're definitely willing to have those conversations, and we can kind of help guide people in the best directions. But I think, time will tell. These are brand new positions. And so this is our vision at this exact moment in time, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what the volume of workload is, because we heard loud and clear from all of you in the basins of, hey, it'd be great to have folks on the ground in our communities and not just folks based in Denver. And my hope is that this program will grow. And I know it's so new, but I see a few of the managers online. I see Laura's name there, and I think some others as well. So it'll be interesting for you to give us an update, down the road to see, what the real need is down the road. Is, we have 4 right now. Do we need 6? Do we need 7? I guess we probably don't know quite yet. Ken?
Well, and just along with that assistance, there's also just the capacity, because we have some really great ideas of projects that we've identified, and we have some funding, but the capacity within the basins is often short. And interesting, we have a nice tour with the CSU today talking about how do we make sure that our students understand that there's great opportunity in the water world for real occupations. I think that's a challenge that we need to try to figure out, is how to encourage higher education to have a more meaningful part in how we solve all these problems with capacity. Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have Nate Pearson, our DNR Recovery Director, who will give us an update on what we need to know about the infrastructure and IRA. And Nate has previously met with us in the past, and we appreciate you joining us to actually, you 3 may be on our agendas for future meetings as well, just to really continue to make sure we're all up to speed. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. And thanks. I'll start by sort of carrying on from Anna's conversation of capacity. First of all, just so appreciate CWCB and Anna's work standing up this new program, and really excited about the interest we've already seen and the results we hope to get from it. I'll just say that we, at DNR CWCB, we're sort of a bit ahead of the curve in setting aside money for technical assistance like this. And I just want to point out that sort of the rest of the state is catching up, and there are some additional opportunities for technical assistance that could be useful in the water space. And so just earlier this week, the governor and his recovery office announced that there will be 14 grant navigator positions added in local government agencies sort of across the state. I think mostly in COGs, so councils of governments. And so those 14 positions are similar to the water plan grant managers located around the state, can work with folks in local governments on sort of all manner of projects, including potentially water projects. So another great capacity building opportunity there. Similarly, and sort of along those same lines, there's also a forthcoming series of webinars designed for local governments that'll be focused on regions around the state and specific issue areas. I'll be participating in most of those, talking about water funding opportunities, but again, just really doing as much as we can to get the word out about all these opportunities and the resources available to local governments, nonprofits, special districts, and going after those funds. We're trying to play catch up, so I'm not going to talk about in great detail about sort of new funding opportunities. I've talked about it with you all before, but we have a spreadsheet that we try to keep updated. There's links to it on the CWCB website that are just keeping track of sort of currently available federal funding opportunities. A couple exciting new ones that we've talked about before, but they were new programs created at the Bureau of Reclamation that didn't have guidance established yet. But one just launched recently. That's the Watershed Health funding opportunity, which is being run through the Water Smart program. So that's $80 million. They're taking applications through the end of March, and I think the projects can be up to $3 million per project. And then another exciting one that hasn't launched yet, but we expect to sort of later this winter, early spring, is the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Grant. Again, through the Bureau of Reclamation. They've just started previewing guidance, but not open for applications yet. Just earlier this week, NRCS and the Bureau launched a new sort of like joint equip Water Smart program that they're calling their Western Water and Working Lands Framework. And so the initial goals are to improve water supply forecasting, sustain agricultural productivity, protect surface and groundwater, restore rangelands and forests, and respond to catastrophic events. So definitely hopeful that this can help, inform future investments. I think the first allocation was $25 million and did not include Colorado projects, but we hope it can in the future. And then on all the Colorado River drought funds that were in the bipartisan infrastructure law and IRA, I think Amy gave a great update on sort of where the status of those through the SCCP and some of the measurement improvements coming down out of that funding are. So I won't add to that, but with that, I'll pass it to Kelly. Otherwise, happy to answer questions.
Okay. Any questions for Nate? There may be questions for all of you at the end, possibly. And next we have Kelly Romero-Heaney, our Assistant Director for Water.
Great. Thanks, Director Gibbs. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I just wanted to provide you all with an update on the legislative process for this session. We're about a third of the way through the session. Cannot believe that. And DNR and the governor have a few water-related priorities that I want to make sure that you all are aware of. The first is the governor's budget proposal regarding our Colorado River team. You may have heard a little bit about it, but bottom line is, the governor is proposing to add 14 FTE within DNR, including staff within CWCB, the Executive Director's Office, and DWR, to help provide the staffing resources that Colorado needs to be prepared for everything from our interim guideline negotiations, understanding how water is moving through the Colorado River system, making sure that we are adequate, that we are really communicating well on Colorado River issues, keeping folks informed. So, and we'll be adding 8.5 staff within Division Water Resources, mostly technical staff there, 4 within CWCB, a couple technical positions, and some administrative support, and then a federal policy specialist. And then within the Executive Director's Office, we'll be creating a Colorado River Commissioner role, understanding that our Colorado River Commissioner is very busy on Colorado River issues, and that is a full-time job. So we are hopeful that will go really well through the legislature. It's currently within the long bill. Also in our budget, in the governor's budget, is an additional $12.6 million of general fund dedicated to water plan grants that would match the $12.6 million that'll be available next year through sports betting. So really, we're looking at about a little over $25 million for water plan grants, and we know that we can triple, quadruple that when it's matched with local and federal funding sources. And so we're really excited to start getting closer to that $100 million mark for water plan implementation, especially since we've just approved and the water plan is adopted, and we'll be implementing that. There's also an additional FTE for CWCB, a water plan data and mapping specialist. I think will really help us make sure that our water plan grant program and implementation is going smoothly. Other legislative priorities for DNR, although this bill has not been introduced yet, you may have heard that we are working on a stream restoration and water administration bill that would really clarify what needs to be done for stream restoration so that it will not be subject to administration. And it's definitely kind of a tricky issue to really wrap our brains around. But we have drafted something. Happy to share the draft that we're working on, going to be making changes, trying to get as much feedback as we can. But bottom line, the state recognizes how important healthy streams are to flood safety, fire recovery and mitigation, even as part of our water infrastructure. I think as water people, we used to be pipes, plants, and reservoirs people, and now we're pipes, plants, reservoirs, and healthy streams people, because we understand the importance of natural infrastructure to our water security. And so recognizing that stream restoration has been such a great tool in our tool shed for so long, we want to make sure that there's a really clear path going forward. The challenge, of course, is that some stream restoration projects do kind of look or operate similarly to a diversion. And so we really want to offer clarity there in how a project proponent can do a project, making sure that it stays within the historical footprint of a stream or its riparian area. So that water users are both protected and stream restoration is still a tool available to us. And we think this legislation is urgent for a number of reasons. Stream restoration is critical to climate resilience, fire recovery, flood protection, ecosystem health, et cetera. But also, as you just heard my colleague Nate discuss, there is significant federal funding heading to the Western U.S. for aquatic ecosystem restoration, riparian and watershed restoration, and we don't want Colorado to miss out on that. So happy. I know we don't have a lot of time today, but I'm happy to discuss with anybody more details. And we're hoping either kind of late February, early March introduction for that bill.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Questions on the legislative front for Kelly in the room or online? Okay. You three got off pretty easy. Next time will be harder, probably. No, no, thanks so much. Great. Okay, next up we have outdoor water conservation efforts, and Russ Sands will give an update on the turf build program and the working group and drought summit.
Thanks so much, Dan. I'll make this quick because I know that we're behind. I think I just put up one slide, which we'll bring up, which is really just showing you the engagecwcb.org webpage, which you're welcome to navigate to. But on that page, right above this is all links to everything water plan. But next thing is kind of everything turf related. So we have a turf basics page, which is kind of general information, because by and large, thanks to the media, the biggest pot of questions I get are from people that generally are not qualified to participate in this program. They're just homeowners that maybe could benefit from a program in their area that a water utility or county or city is putting on, but they are not the direct recipients of the state money from us. So we have some basics there for them, because I think there's some general perceptions around, the difficulties of replacing turf, what that costs, what you replace it with, that we've tried to kind of steer people people to some resources that can get them help, or just to their own utilities to find out more information. There is the replacement program. So that's really talking about the turf bill, and the vision for that, as we kind of understood it, and there's a bit to interpret within it, chiefly just understanding that that was generally geared at municipalities, water utilities, water districts, counties, local government that have primarily first an existing turf replacement program that they are providing some kind of rebate for. That could go to single family, could go to multifamily, could go to CII, commercial, industrial, institutional property. It could go to some portion of all those that are their highest water users. It could go to none of those and really be focused on maybe what they want to focus on in their community with regards to replacing medians, turf and medians, or turf in parks that maybe is a section of a park that they don't need turf in, getting to the heart of the non-functional turf. The other piece of that program is helping new programs start up. And so we have and are required to contract with at least one third-party contractor to help with that. So the way we've kind of envisioned that is with this kind of using the language from the water plan, the transformative landscape change, or as I like to just kind of show your lawn some TLC. The TLC challenge is really more of an open call to folks that maybe don't have a program, don't know where to get started, maybe don't have the funds to necessarily start something, but could potentially kick in some funding, or at least some in kind to support something. And we will have kind of 3 recipients of that. So the contest kind of idea there is more of a challenge idea to have people pitch us their best idea of what, could use some support in their community. And then we've contracted with Resource Central out of Boulder, who have a really great turf replacement program. I think they call it actually lawn replacement. And then they also have native plants. So they will help us replace up to 2,000 square feet of turf for 3 communities and provide them with native plants. Those are the kind of main pieces there. I guess timing wise, we have 2 tranches of funding. So thinking about that replacement program, we are currently open through the end of March for that first entry point. And then we will kind of close things up, work with contracting who came in and kind of vetting those projects that came into us to make sure that they're qualified recipients. Again, there's about 4 categories. So we kind of, anybody that's in that general local government water district kind of category, districts are called out specifically. Native American tribes are called out specifically, and as are 501c3 nonprofits. Specifically, we kind of qualified that they're 501c3 that work in water. I think this was really envisioned to support groups like Resource Central who have the capacity to help local government do something. That said, our funding could go to support, again, standing up a program or supporting an existing program that gives out money to, whether it's single family homeowners or any of, local customers that are using water and have non-essential turf, or it could go to a specific project. And I think some of the feedback we've heard are people are excited to really use this as a pilot. And a lot of utilities don't necessarily know, even if they have a big 30% lofty goal of replacement of turf, exactly how they're going to replace that non-essential turf or where they would do that. So piloting things and looking at medians or specific parks where they might be able to take out things is certainly on their minds, as is ours, and how to support all of that is our goal. There's a second round of funding that will open up in July, kind of get anybody that maybe isn't ready now, but is thinking about that next year's irrigation season, knowing that some people have to build in to their budget this year, what they need to get started for 2024. So we'll be opening that up in July, closing that up in September. And I think that will probably burn through the money we have. It's interesting as we get the requests coming in, and we've done some research on this too. It's just some exploratory analysis of just what are the total cost needs. And the total cost needs across the state, if we were really going to replace what we estimate to be all the non-functional turf in the state, is in the billions. On the low end, probably $3 billion and likely much higher. So with the effective $1.5 billion that we have in this program, An easy way to think about that would be we have about, if every county participated, we have about $25,000 per county. Or if we rebated 1,000 square foot of turf, for if we did go to the single family homeowner, we could do, maybe 20 homes, up to 20 homes in each county in the state. So that kind of puts in perspective of the constraints that we have, and what we're trying to do is be most effective with the money we have. So with that, focusing this on getting that value add, or trying to bring that 10x factor to people that have existing programs, to use it as an educational opportunity of the broader suite of tools that need to be employed, is much on our mind. So at the Landscape Summit, which is that other tab that you'll see, if you click on there, we did a exploratory analysis of just what the savings might be, what the potential is. And we know that's just an exploratory analysis of where we think things are at. We don't have all the data. The data out there isn't great. We hope that we will learn a lot through rolling out this program and get some refined numbers. But we do know it's about an order of magnitude less of what we have kind of been told we might expect to see out of this. And a lot of it's because of the assumed savings are automatic comparisons with a state like ours in Las Vegas, where they have more year-round watering and much higher evapotranspiration rates. So where they're trying to get down to in terms of turf replacement savings for xeriscape is kind of our starting block for turf in the state of Colorado anyway. So the delta is just not always as great of what we're going to save, especially because we're not generally talking about watering nothing. We're talking about watering something less. So replacing down to xeriscape is going to get us some savings, but it's not really, down to we're not in most cases talking about zero watering. So lots to be learned there. I think we're going to learn a lot through this program. I think it's absolutely essential and critical tool for the state to have, but really hoping that this can inspire utilities not only to explore this space, but really kind of double down on how they view their rates, how they use landscape or land use codes. We have kind of seen that land use codes and rates and water budgets are the types of tools that could get us the savings a lot quicker, maybe more savings than we're projecting out of a program like this in a fraction of the time. And those tools are things that I think we can continue to leverage with our partners. So how do we do that? The governor had the good foresight, and supported by Director Gibbs and team, to direct us to have this urban landscape task force. I think the goals there are kind of twofold. One, we hope that task force will help us really kind of understand the practical side of this. So for utilities out there looking to do this, or for those that are participating that have this 30% goal in the MOU, how do we practically make steps towards advancing that? I think there's a lot of information sharing. I wrote down what Rick said, but looking at what others are doing, is the industry ready? What are the public's thoughts? These are all things on our mind that we're hoping the task force could help us think through a little bit more. And then I think there's the other piece of that is, how can we be helpful as government? Is it putting more money in a program like this? Is it something more targeted? Is it, us looking at how we can help support and educate local government, leaning in on things that we're already supporting, like growing water smart, trying to build those connections that we've really tried to highlight in the water plan around water conservation, land use planning, and then alternative water supplies. So that's kind of the thrust of those two pieces, the turf rollout and then the urban landscape task force. Last thing, just to put on your radar, and it's tentative dates right now, but we're trying to zero in on maybe the last week in May, first week in June. And we'll see what kind of pans out for space and if that conflicts with anything else. But to hold a statewide drought summit, the governor also announced that at Water Congress. So this drought summit would really be a time to kind of, I think, decompress a little bit and really evaluate what we've been living through for the last few years. What are the lessons learned? What's that telling us? What are some of the things that we could really expect moving forward? The last time we did a state drought summit was in 2012, and Taryn Fennessy led that up. It was a phenomenal effort and really brought together a collaborative group across the state that tried to bring in the usual suspects that we are so used to seeing, but also reach out to people that may not have always come to meetings like that. So try to reach out to, maybe some of the utility directors or land use planners, and really bring a good mix of people in So we will try to do something similar, I think, for this, but the goal really being to highlight the latest and greatest of what we know, work that's really moving forward to implement the water plan in this space, probably have some kind of interaction with this urban landscape task force, and to the extent that we've had some input or data to share on the turf rebate program, I imagine it to kind of be a piece of that as well. So more to come in that space.
Great. Thanks, Russ. Exciting stuff. A lot going on just in your update alone. Any questions for Russ on these items? Yeah, Ken.
Thanks for the update, Russ. A couple things. What's this participation level from the Colorado Municipal League on this? Have they agreed to like put in a seminar for their annual summit, or have they embraced this as well?
Great question. I haven't had a request on this on anything recently, but I presented to them a couple of months ago, and we talked about this and got some really good input from some of they had a workshop they did and had a lot of the mayors there and got some really good input on both sides of the slope, honestly. But one thing Rick had brought up that resonated with me is the industry ready? One of the comments that kind of stuck with me is, and I think we do see, if you go to see Home Depot on any given day, for good or bad, you're going to see a lot of seed and sod being sold, but you also see some xeriscape plants that arguably weren't there before, but they're probably not as prevalent as they need to be. We need to transform the market. That was one of my big takeaways there.
And do we have a simple video that just says this is what turf replacement looks like, like with a little 1-minute trailer, just so something that plants that seed in the average individual's mind? Because I think if we can get more public interested going to their elected officials saying this is a program we really need to support, we may see a more aggressive support out of those elected officials.
Yeah, a good idea. And maybe a potential PEPO project we could think about as well. I will say, one of the biggest is, and I found this too, just in my past municipal experience, but a lot of times the people that are most frequently coming to us, they're kind of both ends of the spectrum. They're and I don't mean to paint everybody with a broad brush, but we see a lot of interest from people that are already conserving. And those really, from a municipal perspective, if we got $25,000 to give somebody, that's not the biggest bang for your buck, right? Now, on the other side of the coin, the people that are wasting the most usually are never going to come to you and kind of poo-poo any ideas to save water. But there is, in that kind of 75th, 90th percentile range, a great capacity to bring their water use down. And those are the people we probably target. Those aren't usually the people that are coming to us asking questions. And this is where rates play in so heavily, because if there's a financial incentive to conserve, they'll do it. Whereas this is kind of giving them a benefit to do it. And that plays a role. We need to have carrot and stick both, but hopefully we could explore both sides of that.
Great. Aaron.
Quick question. I know that the situation is very different, but Southern Nevada Water Authority has this program that's done a lot more because they don't have anywhere else to save generally. How do they fund that program? Is that an easy question? Like, where does the money come from? Is it taxes? Is it something else? I'm just curious how they've been able to be so successful there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure ratepayers are part of it, but go ahead. Yeah.
They've leveraged some federal funds, ratepayers, and they don't have a lot of choices, right? This might shock you, but they have a little bit more money than maybe the average utility.
Yeah, and they're a conglomerate of multiple groups, right? They're multiple utilities working together. The other side of that equation, and I feel like gets lost in this combo, is they don't just have a turf replacement program, right? They are aggressively using land use planning. They are aggressively using rates. They are using other, so when we think about things, even from the equity lens, and this was a really interesting conversation that came up at the landscape summits, but the conversation of, again, if we're going to put money towards something, we're usually doing that to get the biggest bang. So we're going to put it to the customer that is using the most water so that we can drive their water use down, because that's where we're going to see the most, especially with limited funding. On the other end of the spectrum, we have customers that we've seen, Colorado Springs Utilities, that we've seen in formerly Colorado Springs Utilities and Denver Water, where they just made the decision not to water, right? So they don't even have functional turf, let alone non-functional turf or any turf, right? So there needs to be compendium programs that places like Southern Nevada Water Authority do to give them something, So it's really, utilities are best set up to provide that suite of tools.
Yeah, I recognize it's comparing apples to oranges. I was just curious how they came up with all that money, and that was helpful. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move to one of our final items. We have IBCC planning, PEPO, and statewide discussion. Russ, you want to kick this off, or Lisa? One of you?
I'll give a quick lead in. So I've been reflecting a lot, and I want to thank some of you that I've had some deeper conversations with. I know Ken Curtis is listening in too, but I think several of you just encouraged us to have kind of let's have a good discussion about, effective IBCC meetings, what we work on, and where we might kind of look to the future. So we wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit, and Lisa and I have talked a little bit to kind of tag team this. And I do find a lot of hope in the PEPO piece of this in the discussion, because that's one of the clear mandates in the original legislation, that we're going to do education and outreach. For example, I think we hear a lot about policy development. It's not in 1177 with regards to what IBCC does. It's not part of kind of what we normally tackle, although roundtables and IBCC clearly help us inform policy all the time, every day. Over the last, I guess, going on 6 years now for me, I think I've only missed one IBCC meeting. at least Lisa knows which one. Having been at those, I think that we hear a consistent refrain of a few things. If we're getting together, we don't want to just be talked at. We want time to talk, and we want to work on something. And so when I was talking with Ken Curtis, he goes, "Well, you should just unpack this the way that we just did, because we had a pretty good conversation." I said, "Okay, well, let's just start off with, we want to talk." So I think it's, what do we want to talk about? And I think, we have seen more and more that a lot of that conversation, and certainly over the last few years with demand management, has veered towards that interstate side of the equation that I think we heard pretty eloquently last February from Dan, is, again, not necessarily the purview of IBCC. It doesn't mean that we can't have some discussions and inform that. And I think we had some great ones today, but that's not the main area that we focus on. So then we, as a kind of remedy for that, of how do we communicate that information and get that to a feedback, have committed to you all that we will have these presentations from Director Mitchell or from Amy or others on our team, or sometimes things have involved Kevin and we've had them report out, but those are presentations, right? And then I think that there's solid information that Dan, I know Director Gibbs is always wanting to get information to you, make sure that you're seeing the same things that he's seeing on the ground and you're all equally in the know. And this is in some ways a relic of just the fact that, things have changed since 2005. What did your phone? Did you have an iPhone? I didn't have an iPhone in 2005. Things have changed a lot. We get communication a lot differently now, a lot more rapidly. In the last 2 years, we've seen the proliferation of things like Zoom. So we are in some cases repeating things at meeting, because that was always what we did. We wanted to make sure that IBCC was just as informed, if not more so, than anybody else, so they could relay that information back to roundtables. And so I've been really encouraged by today's conversation, because despite some of that repetition, it does feel like we've had really good conversation. There's been an emphasis, I think, on meeting in person. I think there's been an emphasis on education and outreach. And so thinking about how we coalesce around a central vision and maybe how we can lean in on that space, we thought, what's the best way that we could really set IBCC up for success in create greater alignment between the CWCB board, the IBCC, and the roundtables. And maybe I'll kick it over to Lisa to talk about what we've been thinking.
Thanks, Russ. Now, on just reflecting on the PEPO and the role of the PEPO liaisons, do we need to do anything formal to introduce our new PEPO liaison, IBCC PEPO liaison?
I like that. Yes, I was thinking about that while I was talking. I'm glad you called it out. So I guess we could open it up for anybody that would like to volunteer to be on the committee. But since Robert Sakata, now Director Sakata, left, it's just been Lisa Party of One on the IBCC PEPO subcommittee. So if anybody would like to join, we want to open that up now. But certainly I've had some input that Ken Brenner, I don't know if you want to say anything, but we're certainly happy to have you on board if you'd like to join.
No, there's been an ongoing discussion now for about a year. So yeah, it'd be nice to actually, in this capacity, I would be honored to serve as more of a PEPO perspective and see what we can do to make the IBCC more effective, more successful.
That's great. I'm happy to have you, Ken.
Thank you.
And if there's anybody else, certainly taking anyone that would like to work with us.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's really rewarding to work through the PEPO issues. And Ken talked a little bit about some of the things that we're going to look toward in terms of the incredible funding. And thank you so much that we have now to try to promote some of these efforts, including trying to utilize some of the Water 22 materials. We had this great outreach, and I think we got a lot of interest statewide, and we want to try to capitalize on that. So we'll go ahead and do that. But as we've been talking, and we got the visit from Ken and Jeff and Tom at our recent Metro Roundtable, we were thinking about the times in the past where we've been able to bring people together, bring us all together, and we really enjoy that cross-pollination. And it occurred to us, and I brought it up the Metro Roundtable, and Jeff was there smiling behind me, and he wasn't kicking my chair. We were thinking that it's been a while since we actually held a Colorado Roundtable Summit. So the C9 Summit was, believe it or not, I think that was in 2019. So that was 4 years ago. And as Russ just said, a lot has happened in the last 4 years, and it would probably be just delightful to be able to bring everyone back, the roundtable, the CWCB board members, directors that are able to attend IBCC. And so we were wondering if folks felt like that was a worthwhile idea. And if they did find that that was worthwhile, what's the best way for us to come up with agenda items that would be that would serve to encourage this type of dialogue, right? And we can use our PEPO liaisons for that purpose to try to put together some of these presentations or workshopping ideas. So I'll just stop there and sort of gauge the crowd, whether or not people think that would be of value.
See a few thumbs up. Any comments on this? Everyone in the room is kind of thumbs up. What about online?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I agree.
Thanks, Nathan. Okay, a lot of thumbs up. I think, for me, it's getting key water leaders around the same room together is super valuable. And even just like today, it's wonderful to catch up and have coffee or share a sandwich with folks. And almost a lot of the work is outside of this meeting too, which is really valuable.
Well, and thank you for that support, and thank you, folks online too. When we are looking at topics, when we're looking at things that we could be discussing, we really have 2 meetings left this year. I think it's June and October, the 2 dates. One of the things that we've been thinking a little bit about is whether or not the summit would take the place of that last meeting, and how we could utilize that time to bring some things together for the IBCC, perhaps to report out or create a dialogue around at that summit. Now, we know that the Colorado River issues have been foremost on almost all of our minds, and whether or not there's something that we could create, a dialogue we could create in November around that topic is one that I think Director Mitchell, I don't know if you want to speak to. Becky and I had been talking earlier about what the things that we could look at that were real successes for the IBCC in the past. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit was the conceptual framework, and how that was a huge effort that really was a positive thing in the first water plan, and ended up, I think, progressing our conversations even more. Is there something similar that we could be working on?
Yeah, and I don't think we want to make that decision exactly today, but I think the answer is yes, what it is. I think in terms of what would be helpful for me, and the reason I want to think about this a little bit is because I want to make sure as we move forward, these are tentative times as it relates to Colorado River discussions. And really there's a definition of roles of the CWCB and the commissioner, and making sure that as we come up with broad thoughts and ideas, that we don't do anything that impedes the interstate negotiations or damages any future legal strategy if necessary. So I think I think the answer is yes, and I think it would be helpful. I also think that it's critical that the CWCB have some roles and maybe there's some things to push up to the CWCB level and go in that direction. But I think that there have been times where the IBCC has been incredibly beneficial to moving the state forward, and we need to figure out what exactly the asks are so we can get there.
And maybe I'll just add to that one of the other things we talked about that we were both reminiscing on what used to be great, and I've talked with a few others of you about this, but the West Slope Caucus used to be an awesome thing that River District helped put together. And Jim Pokrant, who I still miss, did a great job, like kind of running that. And then, on the other side of the slope, we did a little bit of that, but it just seems to me it's time really to double down on bringing everybody together. Some of the things as we go around and Jeff and I, going around the different roundtables, hear a lot of this is just, still some contentious discussion. So I really appreciate Pat's comments that, maybe we're getting a little more civil. And I think it's good. We're going to have some heated debates at times, but I do think the more and more, and I remember that conversation with you still, Ken, of just helping each side of the slope see the things that we're all struggling with and how connected we are. Seems like this C9 summit could really be something that maybe even if it's successful and we like it, could become an annual something that we work on as IBCC that kind of gives us a little bit of an anchor and provides a greater platform that doesn't allow just IBCC to have that discussion, but have it with the roundtables and really engage those members that want to be closer at the table and engage the board members too, so that we have a more clear alignment as we move forward from year to year.
Yeah, Aaron.
I would agree, and I don't have any specific ideas, but making sure that the agenda provides a real opportunity for meaningful dialogue, as opposed to just a bunch of presentations are critical to kickstart things, but knowing, we like to talk. The roundtables are not groups that generally sit around and just listen. So having an agenda that allows for whether it's kind of breakout groups or some kind of real dialogue. Otherwise, a free sandwich is great, but people want to actually feel like they're contributing. So I don't know what that would be. Maybe it's Colorado River issues. Maybe it's something else. But
maybe we just have another water plan party and put you all in the back of the
perfect. Yeah, great. open bar.
Yeah, and with an open bar.
Okay, there are a few comments online. It looks like Ken first, and then is it maybe Juris, and then Al, I think.
Russ, Lisa, thanks for helping unpack this. I do think maybe a summit is appropriate if you can pull it off. I appreciate you trying to bring in some conversation as appropriate around Colorado River issues. 2 quick comments. Probably would have got canceled if I tried to get up there today anyway. But it is tough to try and make these 4-hour meetings with 10 to 12 hours of travel. But if you put a full day meeting together, I will work on getting there. I would like to be there in person. Beyond that, one other thought, and I agree with Aaron that I'd like to see more dialogue across the table, but we could expand on what Anna and Nate presented. They were good presentations, but obviously given the short time, they weren't too deep. And I'm just thinking maybe some roundtables that have been successful, a couple of more in-depth reviews of how people have accessed federal money in other roundtables, and that could maybe be an East Slope and a West Slope, because get some of that cross mountain dialogue going and help us with our capacity issues. Also, we haven't heard from Chris Sturm. The forest issues remain big. Some roundtables are more into the forest. Down here with our local collaboratives, the roundtables somewhat stayed out of the forest issues, although many of us have feet in both camps. So just a couple ideas. I'll keep working with you, Lisa, Russ, and now Ken. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ken. And let's see if the screen will open up. I know there are a few other comments. Folks had their hands up. Do you know, Viola? Was Jairus maybe? Jairus up next? And then Al. Okay.
Thanks, Russ. You know, the real backbone of 1177 was, in my opinion, the creation of the roundtables. And we had one meeting, I think, in the past where we got a bulk of the roundtables all together in one room. Didn't let them all sit together, but scattered them throughout each other. And I thought that was a very productive effort. We get that cross-pollination. You know, it's one thing for me as an IBCC rep to go back to my roundtable and report on what went on. But I think the real value is when those people sit down with other people from White Yampa, North Park, whatever, and have discussions. And I'd like to see a way if we could do that.
Great recommendation. A lot of thumbs up. Let's see. I think Al's next, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Director Gibbs. Just a situation here we're facing recently where two Trans Mountain diversions, albeit very small, but our local district here, we're opposing these transfers from the San Juan Basin over to the Rio Grande Valley. And I was talking with Ravil about it, and he suggested that it might be a good topic for IBCC to tackle those issues that, you know, here we're taking water. We have a crisis in the Colorado River. We're taking water from there, putting it over to Rio Grande. Granted, they have a crisis also, but you know, just how do we most appropriately deal with that and still remain civil type of scenario? So I guess just a suggestion mainly for topics we might deal with.
Great. Thanks, Al. Online, any other questions? And then I'll go to the room. No? Okay. Melly?
Yeah, I just, again, I think you touched on it, Becky, a little bit, that you have to think about it. But I think there's a lot of value to have the roundtables officially support what you're doing. And I know that there's some outliers out there that have different opinions, and there are some things that we need to work through, but I think it's worthwhile to bring the IBCC together with the roundtables, being supportive of what you're doing. I may be wrong, but I think that, I don't know, I mean, it has to be helpful to you and your job, but I think that my sense is that the roundtables really, really bad want to get into the Colorado River discussions, and they feel a little isolated right now. They're feeling a little outside of it. So, I mean, I understand that there is no policy role for this body, but we could have a role in bringing in, you know, the leadership of the water world here in Colorado together to support what you're doing. That would be my suggestion, and I've made it before.
Great. Any more questions or comments for folks in the room? Ken?
Thank you, Director Gibbs. I'm a big proponent of this, just from my various lifetime experiences in local government and higher education, that we will collectively learn a lot from each other. And the summit, if it's successful, will be convened in such a way that it makes it easy for us to learn from each other, whether that's in a collective, more plenary type of environment, or whether we're broke out into small groups. And I remember a series of meetings that we had in March of 2020, right before the pandemic set in, and we met out on Sims to talk about demand management. And so we had some really good general sessions. There was 2 full days of meetings. We had lots of small committee meetings based around your small work groups that you'd set up. But boy, there was some great idea sharing. Those were very effective, and that's a model that we could replicate. But I really firmly believe that we have a lot to learn from each other. And I don't want to throw out conservancy districts and conservation districts. We're all working on the same things, and the less we can appear to be in silos, just worried about our own district boundary, and the more we talk about being Colorado advocates for water, I think the more successful that we can become. So I'm really excited about the possibility of pulling this together.
Great, thank you, Ken. Okay, Russ.
I was, well, thank you so much. And thanks for your good input. And I was thinking about that meeting too. And that maybe does provide a good template we can kind of pull the best of, but we would like to invite you all to kind of give us that input and maybe to kind of start to create this alignment. If you can go back and work with, your constituents or your roundtable specifically and give us some input. We'd really appreciate that, because I think it could get emailed to Lisa or Ken or I or all 3 of us, and we could use that to populate some draft agenda that we could bring to the June meeting. And that kind of combined with the culmination of Dan's challenge to work on a project, we could that might start to really build a really nice June meeting agenda. So I think just was kibitzing here with Jeff, but I think if we got asked for input by the end of April, that would allow enough time for all roundtables to have met again. It'd be really nice, even if it's, top 3 things or top 10, to get some synergies around what would people most like to talk about, and think about that too. I guess through both lenses, I'd like to hear about X. So when I hear, I think Ken Curtis talked about Chris Sturm, maybe there's wildfire ready watershed presentation, but if we want to also think about this more kind of plenary session or breakouts, what would that be most beneficial around? Would be really helpful for us to know.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Russ. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Pat.
Just reflecting on this conversation, I'd like to suggest, it seems like there's maybe 2 themes I'm hearing. One theme was, it sounds like there were some good things happening before COVID with the C9 Summit and the Demand Management Summit, and there were some things that were working well. It might not hurt for everyone to reflect on what was working well before the Colorado River smacked us in the face and before COVID. And then the other thing is, sometimes it's simplest, and I'm going to speak in like performance evaluation terms, and I know we're probably all going to get a little PTSD with that. But sometimes maybe we just need to ask the roundtable something as simple as start, stop, continue. What would you like the IBCC? What would you like us as the water community to start doing, to stop doing, and to continue doing? And just kind of ask for some kind of consistent feedback that we could then take and bake into a summit or a program or something. So just an idea.
Like that, Pat. Yeah, that's great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we're 2 minutes late actually, but I just really wanted to thank everyone for being here today. Everyone that braved the weather to be here in person, as well as those that participated virtually. Does everyone still like this kind of virtual hybrid concept that, if folks can make it here in person, but if not, you can still participate? Is that still a good deal? It's interesting. Some of the boards and commissions that are part of the DNR prefer all virtual. Some prefer hybrid, some prefer all in person. So I just want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of everyone to offer this opportunity to have virtual as well as in person. So thumbs up, everyone. It looks good online too. Well, thanks. Thanks, Ross. Thanks everyone for helping to put this meeting together today. I thought it was really great. It's awesome to hear the Colorado River updates, Becky and Amy, and hear from you all too on what you're working on. I think it's really important part of our conversations to really understand the key components of issues and challenges and opportunities that are in your backyard that we can all learn from. I also really appreciate Anna, Nate, and Kelly joining us today to offer their insights. When we think about capacity, when we think about what is potentially available, and we think about, the legislative session, which moves really quickly. Those are all key areas that we really need to be, up to speed on. and Russ, your updates on, on the turf program and the drought summit. I really love all those. And then, the concept of the C9 2.0 summit, I think really will be amazing. And Ken, I appreciate you stepping up to be a part of PEPO to give Lisa some help. So with that, I just want to thank you all again and look forward to working with you at our next meeting. And as Russ said, go back to the basins, really look at what are those top 3 issues that you think we really need to tackle moving forward for a summit. And we can use that to put together the agenda for the summit. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Yeah, Sean?
A quick public service announcement.
Sure. Yeah.
St. Brandon Left-Hand Water Conservancy District has a truck. The catalytic converter got stolen off of it. We have to wait until July to get a catalytic converter. Colorado has a new law around particular types of catalytic converters. We have to go to Wyoming to get it fixed. If you don't think it's going to happen to your organization, look it up.